Good. Good.
Okay.
Good evening and welcome visitors tonight, staff, city council, and to the viewing public. Tonight is a regular meeting of the Oak Harbor City Council. It is April 17th, 6 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order and invite you to stand and join us in an invocation tonight led by Pastor Randy Boomer. I might not be saying that right, but okay. Oak Harbor Christian Reformed Church, and following that, I'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So.
Here this year, May 3rd, the National Day of Prayer theme is unity. So I'd like to pray a prayer with unity in mind. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we thank you for the glory of your grace that has been won for us through the death and resurrection of your Son, Jesus. And Lord, we thank you for the blessings of the city. We thank you for the provision of many who serve us. We think of the military. We think of other servants in our community. We also think of our council. We thank you for their wisdom and the blessing that they bring here with their decisions. Mostly, Lord, we pray for unity, not only within us here, within this council room, and within the city. We pray for our nation. And we ask, Lord, that you would bring the unity that you so shepherd us in. Lord, we thank you that our lives aren't just uniformity, but that there is a diversity of opinion, a diversity of differences that come together to unite, to make decisions. We pray, Lord, for that kind of wisdom and blessing as decisions are made tonight, and decisions are made for many years to come. So, Lord, thank you for your many blessings. Be with us in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Randy. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, tonight we have, we had a special workshop that we had on April 11th, I guess it was. Councilmember Heisen requested to attend the meeting via phone due to a conference commitment that she had. And I'd like to entertain a motion to approve her attendance because I believe we have her on the phone line right now. Yes, Councilor Servadius.
I move to allow Councilmember Heisen to participate via telephone.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. A motion by Servadius, second by Mayor Pro Tem to approve that Councilmember Heisen be allowed to attend by telephone. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Welcome, Councilor Heisen. Can you? You bet. We also have council member absent. Councilmember Larson has requested to be excused from tonight's meeting, so I'll entertain a motion to excuse him. Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. I move to excuse Councilmember Larson.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to excuse Councilmember Larson. Motion by Councilor Servadius, second by Councilor Wassinger. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, then we'll move on to our agenda. And I can tell you that staff has asked to move an item on the agenda, and that is resolution number 18-13, and that's regarding the general fund revenue stabilization fund use, and staff would like to move that to 8D. And then so 8D will become 8E. Okay. Yes, Councilor Servadius?
Do you like to motion for that?
Yeah.
So I move to move agenda item 7C to agenda item 8D, moving item 8D down to become 8E.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to follow the staff's agenda change, moving item 7C down to 8D and changing 8D to AD. Motion by Councilor Servadius. I think that second was by Councilor Wassinger. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We heard you. Thank you. So any other changes to the agenda? Okay. If not, we'll proceed with the agenda as has been changed. We have no proclamations this evening. No honors or recognitions either. So we'll get right into citizen comment period. Go on.
Here's the list.
Oh, great. Good. Okay, so citizens may comment on subjects of interest not listed on the agenda or items listed on the consent agenda. To ensure comments are properly recorded, please state your name clearly into the microphone, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes to ensure all citizens have sufficient time to speak. And I see that we have Victor Rojas appearing.
How are you
Welcome,
doing?
Victor.
Hi, sorry, I've never done this before. My name is Victor L. Rojas. I'm a resident of Oak Harbor, Washington, and have been for 24 years. I'm here today because there hasn't been a sustainable place for intermediate, middle school to high school kids to go to be themselves. I would like to create the Hangout, a safe, fun environment to encourage them to be more social and active. The Hangout would have amenities accommodate our older youth with arcade games, virtual reality, a dance hall for dance socials, for age social, I should say, because they will be divided in different ages from 5th to 12th. Free sitting Wi-Fi for children that can't afford it. If they can't, they will be able to still use it for homework. Generations have changed. Life-size pool tables, food and beverages, services, and whatever adjustments we need to make kids more engaged. The Hangout would be help better for their social skills through interaction. I am asking the city if they would like to think about redirecting the $250,000 for the Parks and Recreation to build new ballparks, to actually redirect that to something that would be able to be used every day for 7 days of the week instead of only seasonal due to weather and where we live in the Pacific Northwest. I think that this would be it would benefit our city and our children more than accommodating them for ballparks, in my opinion. I've stated this through what I'd like to do to Miss Erica Weisener, and she agreed as well of the circumstances. And I had also reached out to the public of Oak Harbor, who loved my idea, received overwhelming interest and support, showing that they are all in agreement and endorse the idea. I would like to propose my proposal to you. I think you got only like partial, which I'm very amateurish of this. I've never done this before. So I would like to give you my full proposal of what I would like to do, and hopefully you could take interest and give me some recommendations or help me out in creating this facility for the children of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rojas. Do you want to just leave those up here for us?
Yes, sir. I don't
Okay,
know.
that'd be fine.
Right here?
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
And so, thanks again, Mr. Rojas. Anyone else for citizen comment at this time? Pass it on down, okay. Okay, seeing no others, we'll move on to our consent agenda. And unless anybody has questions or wants to pull anything off, we'll just, that'll be approved as presented. And so we'll move on to my comments, which I have a few, as a matter of fact. I attended actually a community discussion for a Pioneer Way Affordable Housing Project that was presented on April 11th, last Thursday. It was a full house, a good community conversation. We have no actual pre-application for that at this time, but it was a good discussion, and I suspect we will be seeing something in the future. Yesterday, I attended another community conversation at the Oak Harbor School District boardroom in regards to Island County's proposed crisis stabilization and detox facility that they're proposing on Oak Harbor Road. There were approximately 75 people in attendance at that, and pretty good public input and questions at that event. And I know several city council were able to join us. So upcoming events, Serendipity Lane will be unveiled this Friday, the 20th at 4 p.m. I can't thank Public Works staff enough and any other employees. I know we had other departments besides Public Works that were working on this project, as well as Skagit Valley College administration and the students that had their hand in supporting the project to reach this point. I think it's going to be it's going to be not only a fun event, it's going to be, I think you're going to be very impressed with how that looks. We are excited for this newest arrival on Oak Harbor Main Street on Pioneer Way. So the Whidbey Island Marathon. I can tell you that things are buzzing at City Hall, and Nicole Tesh has been asking and getting a lot of help from a lot of staff for the Whidbey Island Marathon. This will be the 17th annual Whidbey Island Marathon, half marathon, 10K, 5K, and a 1K kids run. The day prior, which is this Saturday, the 21st, the expo will be held at Oak Harbor High School main gym and will be open for a packet pickup from 12 p.m. until 7 p.m. Mayor Pro Tem Munns will sound the first bullhorn to begin the full marathon. Wow, that's what time is that? Very early in the morning. Good for you.
And then you're gonna run in it, right?
That begins at Pass Lake. I guess they say starting bright and early at 7 a.m., but I think you assemble there earlier, actually. Rhonda and I will kick off the half marathon at Bayshore Drive, which begins at 8:30, so I'll be able to sleep in. Councilmember Wiesner will then start the 10K and the 5K race at Bayshore Drive, 9 a.m. And the Oak Harbor School District Superintendent Lance Gibbon will begin the kids 1K fun run at Bayshore Drive at 10 a.m. Councilmember Servadius, Wassinger, Allenberg, and Heisen will be meeting runners at the finish line, giving high fives and awarding them with this year's finisher medal. Oh, and by the way, the medal is pretty darn cool if you haven't seen it. So we've got a sailboat that's our bridge, as you can see. So, see that? I'll pass that around. Come down to Bayshore, show your support for the events by cheering on participants as they pass by. After the race, please come join the fellow race participants at the finish line for a fun-filled community post-run celebration featuring live music by Ike and the Old Man, food vendors, including Alfie's Pizza and Beer Garden, provided by Flyers Restaurant. We'll have close to 350 volunteers for this event. It truly showcases the pride of our citizens and our community, and we thank you for being a part of the Whidbey Island Marathon. And then Holland Happening, following weekend, April 26th to the 29th, the Oak Harbor Chamber of Commerce is hosting Holland Happening, an international festival on Pioneer Way. The event will have a carnival, art walk, over 100 vendors, and a grand parade that will take place on Saturday, April 28th at 11 a.m. So I think that's all I have on my list, and I'll turn to council for council comments. Councilor Allenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I also attended that affordable housing open house at the senior center last Wednesday and last night at the school district's office for the crisis and detox center. And there were emotional moments in there, and there was a lot of really good information, good presentation. I would encourage our community to keep an open mind and look at the opportunities more than we look at the emotions that go into these things. But both projects have merit. I'm very interested in seeing what their site plans look like when they present them. I'd also like to thank Oak Harbor's Greg Goebel. He's one of our stalwart volunteers. He's been a participant in our marathons many times, half marathons, full marathons. And this Monday, he ran the Boston Marathon and he finished it. And it was cold, it was wet. I don't know how he did it without a life preserver or a pair of skis, but it was wet. So those thanks go out to our Greg Goebel. Thank you.
Councilor Wassinger.
Yes, Victor left, but Victor is right. I met with Mr. Rojas a few weeks back. It would be Coffee for Coffee, and listened to his ideas about what's lacking for sort of that preteen, teenager demographic in our community. And I fully support his passion and his wanting to provide for that age group. Anytime that we have a community member that shows that much drive and enthusiasm to make this a better place to live and the world a better place, I applaud that. I just wanted to clear up that I didn't specifically talk about funding or support any specific funding sources for that project. I did, though, direct him to come talk to all of us and the mayor and the city administrator and present his ideas to us and share that passion for making our community a better place. And I know he left, but I do thank him and applaud him for that.
Great. Councilor Wiesner.
Yes, I too had the pleasure of attending the last two workshops, both at the senior center and the school district. And I got to say how proud of my community I am over the attendance at the senior center. By all counts, it was over 200 people. Came out on a Wednesday night, stayed there until well after 8 o'clock. There was obviously some tense moments, and not everybody in the room obviously agreed. But the fact that we could get 200 people together on a subject to have a discussion, I think is huge. And I guess I want to reach out to all the citizens of Oak Harbor and say, your voice can be heard, but you have to attend, and you have to take the time. And if you can't, email us, call us, let us know, because we do want to hear. So I do appreciate those people who attended that night.
Okay. Anyone else? Councilor Heisen? Anyone? Okay.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Well, good. Now we'll move on to 5C. Patricia is not able to attend tonight, so I don't think we have any report from that desk. Okay, we'll go right to the Clean Water Facility update. Absolutely. Engineer Brett Arvidsson. Welcome, Brett.
Good evening. It's time for our clean water facility project update. We get all these kind of interesting little devices showing up, and this is actually a UV disinfection system. As the water goes out of our treatment plant, we disinfect it one time to kill any bacteria before it enters the harbor. We use UV lights for that process. This is kind of old history. This is actually something we purchased in December of 2014 under GMP #1. So it's actually showing up after 3 years. So it's pretty exciting. It's a good way to disinfect your sewage so that we lower the toxicity in the harbor. Excuse me. We do have a lot of work going on. The amount of labor has actually exceeded our expectations. A lot of the work is now shifting, as I've said previously, to a mechanical electrical system. This is an electrician on the left installing conduits in our new headworks. And the guy on the right is actually has a rather mundane air compressor for high pressure air in the building air. But we're doing a lot of these things where we actually hook up the equipment and then hook up the panels and everything goes with it. So it's very common activity these days. Oops. Recent activities, we did have a workshop last Wednesday on GMP #13, which we'll have on the agenda later this evening. We are continuing to work on our SCADA software development. That's hot and heavy right now, a lot of coordination in that area. And we have started our operator training, so as we move forward the next couple months, our operations staff is going to be very busy in terms of a wide variety of activities that need to occur. So they're being trained now in the SCADA system and on what we call our backbone process training, and then we'll work more into the vendor training. And we are continuing to obtain development permits for Windjammer Park. Construction-wise, we continue to backfill around structures. That pile is getting smaller every time I look at it. We are continuing activities that I shown earlier on GNP number 9. That's going to be a large part of our work there. Number 11 is a large part of the architectural type things, and those are still moving ahead, but they'll be slowing down. We always projected that we'd be reducing the amount of labor on site, but we've been steady at 115, and that's going to happen for the next couple of months. But around the first year, we thought that'd be dropping down to 100, but the work is happening. The self-performed wood framing is complete, and we're starting to face it. We have completed the majority of the roofing. We're doing a little bit of trimming now and then, but that task is complete. And then above grade masonry work is mostly the brick veneer, and that's going along nicely. Cost versus budget, this number has not changed since last month. This is the numbers as of 3/31. It does not reflect any cost for GNP number 13. If that's approved, then we'll upgrade the sheet. Project budget hasn't changed. It's still at $140,725,000. We did hit a breakthrough this month. We have exceeded $100 million in expense, so we're at $100,336,000. And the remaining budgets on our existing contracts is $40,389,000. So that's where we are. Like I say, this does not reflect GNP 13, and this is through the end of last month. Upcoming major decisions, we do have GNP for consideration later in this evening. Schedule-wise, after GNP number 13, this is the last time you'll see that schedule. We're still very much where we want to be on this project, and we're moving it right along. Schedule highlights, still very much in there. We're anticipating major structural activities done this month, and we're on good shape for that. This July, we're going to complete the installation of the mechanical electrical systems and start our clean water testing on the liquid side of the plant. In August, we'll complete the mechanical electrical on the solids side. September, as we finish clean water testing, we'll start treating sewage. Right now, that's still a very hard date for us. November, we'll hope to have the solids and sewage startup complete. And May to December of this year is going to be a lot of site improvements and Windjammer Park improvements. Councilor Omberg talked about our administrative closeout schedule. I've given you an example. This is going to be start getting more detailed. This is the overall strategy for that. And as it gets more detail, I'm going to start including that in your monthly report, because I think that's probably a better place to give you the detail than up here, because it's going to be, I was going to try to put it up tonight, but it got got hard to read. But right now, we're seeing as the project comes to completion, we'll start up the clean water facility this fall. A lot of activities can't start till we finish that. Windjammer Park is going to be very active through December. We do show activities taking place in the spring because there are some weather-related things that are probably you have to catch up this next year. Our first big milestone is our Department of Ecology SRF loan closeout. That is due at the end of the year, so that's a fair amount of paperwork that we're starting to line up for right now. The punch list activities really can't start till we're actually done with a lot of the activities. On a project of this size, that takes 6 or 8 months. So right now we're anticipating that going into the summer of 2019. Our regulatory approval process will start after substantial completion, and that'll probably take 6 months. We'll be dealing with both solids, liquids, performance, a lot of things like that. Then we have to get certification from DOE on that. And then we need some run time for them to do that. Big part of the job is subcontractor closeout. There's a lot of things we have to do to get subcontractors complete, and that's going to take a fair amount of time. You have to remember, we have 26 major subcontractors to close out, plus they have subs of subs. So there's a fair amount of paperwork that we have to close on that. So typical subcontractor, if we have a clean performance on them, it's going to take 4 to 5 months. We can't really, well, we work in Hoffman on that, but Hoffman really can't close out until the subcontractors are closed. And then we'll do the final acceptance at that point. This schedule is tentative, and we'll be filling that in the next couple of months, but that's kind of where we're looking now. And I expect it to probably stretch out a little bit more. The punch list usually takes longer than you anticipate. If you want to find out more about our project, you can reach us at our website at oakharborcleanwater.org. We have a project call-in line at 914-7000, or you can call our work extensions. You can email us at treatmentplant@oakharbor.org. We do have community drop-in hours. Our next one is May 14th, and we do accept appointments now, and we like to have people come by and visit. Questions?
Council? No? Oh, Councilor Wiesner?
Brett, can you tell me, I've heard some talk about some issues possibly with the dryer building and the installation of the dryer system. How's that coming?
It's coming along very well. Right now, our biggest issue with that is how it's arriving, because it's coming in more parts than we anticipated. We're working with Harslov right now to resolve that. We've been having a few minor issues with the control panels, and those are being resolved. Matter of fact, I had a conversation about that today, so I think we're close to getting that resolved.
And do we have an idea of if that's going to involve a huge cost?
Right now, we're carrying some contingency for that, but like I say, we haven't determined the scale of it. It's a potential issue for us, and we're worried about, but we haven't got to the brass tacks of it yet.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Brett. We will move on to public hearings and meetings, Section 6. We have some contracts or ordinances after that, and then contracts after that. To speak during one of these presentations, whether it be a resolution or a contract or ordinance, please sign in, but if you don't, I'll give you a chance to speak anyway. To ensure comments are recorded properly, please state your name clearly into the microphone, and please limit comments to 3 minutes to ensure all citizens have time to speak. So we'll move on to 6A. We have our Development Services Director, Mr. Steve Powers, and I think Steve will tell you that we're going to actually hold a public hearing regarding Interim Ordinance number 1830 and number 1831, Small Cell Deployment Permit Process and Small Cell Deployment Development Standards. Go ahead, Mr. Powers.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The mayor is absolutely correct. The item before you this evening requires you to conduct a public hearing on these interim ordinances. You might recall that we had you adopt the interim ordinances a little less than 2 months ago, utilizing a process under state law that allowed you to do so without conducting a public hearing first. And so you're now completing that step required by law to conduct the public hearing. It's a little unusual in that the ordinances are already adopted, so really all you're going to do this evening is conduct the hearing. You don't need to re-adopt the ordinances. And then you saw in our agenda bill our proposed schedule for moving this through and bringing it back to you for permanent development regulation adoption. So we'll start with the Planning Commission next month and work our way back up to the council. It looks like in either August or September is when we'll be back here. So happy to help with any questions, but otherwise I think it's pretty straightforward.
Any questions? Okay, so we'll open that public hearing right now.
Yes, sir.
So if anybody would like to speak on that, you're welcome to come. Okay, seeing none, I guess that we'll, if we close the public hearing, that means you're done?
Yes, sir.
Just like that? No questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Powers. Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, geez.
Actually, this is a question for our attorney. With what was passed, we passed this before legislation ends so that we would have a say on what our city wants small cells to look like. with what they finally passed, which we didn't think was going to, did we're still have that right and we don't need to add any more verbiage to what we have?
No, ma'am, not right now.
Okay,
We're okay.
great. Just wanted to be sure that we still had control over what gets put up in our city. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank
anyone
you,
else?
Mr. Powers.
Thank you, council.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to section 7. We have 3 resolutions, and the first one, 7A, is Resolution 18-10, amending Schedule D, Marina of the Master Fee Schedule. I think we have our Harbor Master, Mr. Chris Seblet.
Hello, Mayor, City Council members. Tonight I'm here to talk about proposed marina rate increase, Resolution 1810, which amends Schedule D of the Master Fee Schedule. So just a reminder, the marina is an enterprise fund within the city businesses. We are self-supported. We rely on revenue generated from the marina to operate, and most of the revenue comes from moorage, be it regular moorage, permanent moorage, or guest moorage, storage sheds, and fuel sales. We do have some reserves. We have about 3 months' worth of operating expenses. We have a bond reserve. We have an equipment rental reserve, and that's to replace our truck, our boat, things like that. And then we have a small amount in capital improvements. We are a public marina. There's a lot more to do down there than just keep your boat. We host a lot of events such as Whidbey Island Race Week, the hydroplanes, the Kids Fishing Derby. There's lots of clubs down there, Oak Harbor Yacht Club, Deception Pass Power Squadron, the Youth Sailing Program, the Dragon Boat Club. And there's a lot of photography options up there. We see a lot of people coming down there to take pictures, birds, seals, fish, things like that. So to get to the rates that we're proposing, we did a rate survey of the marinas around us. We chose to survey Anacortes, Cap Sante, Everett, La Conner, and the Port of South Whidbey. We also included Des Moines Marina because it's the only other city marina like us. We took their prices, averaged them out, and then compared them to ours for similar services. And what we found is that some of our current rates are far below the average of those marinas that we surveyed. Some of the proposed rates that we're proposing are at or just above that average, but most are below that average still. An important factor is all this is you have to consider the marina location, and the amenities that it has. Most of the marinas that we surveyed are close to shopping areas, downtowns, and entertainment. A few of them are even close to the San Juans, which is prime cruising ground. All of these things add value. The Marine Advisory Committee, and tonight we have Ken Hewlett in the crowd. He's the chairman of the committee. They met 6 times to discuss this. And they discussed not only the rate increase, but the methodologies that could be used to raise those rates. In the end, they did propose a rate increase and made a recommendation for a rate increase. So the proposed rate increases is 2% on the moorage piece of the moorage bill and 2% on the sheds. We're proposing to increase the environmental compliance fee from $5 to $7.29 per month. And that's used to pay for recycling of oil, antifreeze, to buy absorbent-type materials for oil spills, things of that nature. We also propose to increase the gas moorage electricity from $4 a night to $5 a night. The sheds will go from $130 to $134.80 per month. And we estimate that this proposed increase will generate about $21,000 in revenue for us. So really, the recommended action is approve Resolution 1810, amending Schedule D of the Master Fee Schedule, and that's the marina piece. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, before we do that, we'll see if the public would like to, okay, not seeing any. Council? Yes, Councilor Weiser?
Actually, Ms. Soblet, I would like to commend you and the Marina Committee, Mr. Hewlett there, for the amount of research and work you guys put into this.
Thank you.
I actually did go through this 570-page packet we have tonight, and of it, there was several pages involving the efforts and time you folks put into doing the research, reaching out to the neighboring, creating the charts to try and keep this increase to a reasonable level. And you know, I mean, we could have just picked a number out of the sky, but you guys certainly did the work, and I do appreciate your time and effort on that.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Councilor Wassinger.
If no other comments, I'll move to approve Resolution 18-10, amending Schedule D Marina of the master fee schedule.
Second.
Got a motion in 2 seconds. Motion by Councilor Wassinger, and I'm going to give the second to Councilor Wiesner to approve Resolution number 1810, amending Schedule D Marina of the master fee schedule. Seeing no other questions or input, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Okay. She's just a touch behind us, right? Yeah, good, okay. That, it didn't mean anything by that, Councilor Heisen. Oh, okay.
I guess you should double check. Is she behind her, or was that, she wasn't opposed? She was.
No, she voted for it. Okay, well, I think we're done,
Thank you, sir.
just like that.
Just like that.
Yeah, thank you. We'll move on to item number 7B, which is Resolution 1812, RCO grant application for parkland acquisition. We have our Public Works Director, Kathy Rosen. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. At your last meeting, I gave you a briefing on a grant application that staff has been working on that's due on May 1st. It's an RCO grant, and it would be for the amount of $350,000. That's the maximum we can apply for. And we would use those funds to help assist the funding for a purchase of 75 acres off of Gun Club Road for a new park property. We do have $250,000 in the current year's budget to use for purchasing additional park property, so we're hoping to get some additional funding from RCO. As part of that grant application, the City Council is required to adopt a resolution authorizing us to apply for that grant. The resolution that's in your packet is in the form that is required by RCO. That is their form. And at this point, we're asking that council consider approving that resolution so that we can get our grant application in by May 1st.
Okay, anyone from the public got input or questions? Okay, seeing none. Councilor Wiesner.
Ms. Rosen, so we've got $250,000. We're applying for a $350,000 grant, so that's about $600,000. Have we got anything on the radar screen as to where the rest of the money for the purchase would come from, and how far out would we be able to budget enough money to actually do something with the property?
Well, if we're awarded a grant, the funds would not be available until 2019 for us to use. So we would be looking through for additional funding through our budget cycle that we're going to be going through, as well as seeing if there are other grants available.
Has a price been negotiated on the property? I mean, I don't need no.
No,
price.
it has not.
Okay. And if we get the grant and apply for the grant and the grant is approved, then are we committed to the purchase, or is the grant basically contingent upon the purchase, and if we don't move forward with the purchase, the grant money just goes back?
That's correct. It's a reimbursable grant, so we have to upfront the money and then get reimbursed if we receive the grant.
Okay. And finally, am I correct in the fact that this park in this location is in what we would consider the noise zone for the flight patterns?
Development Services Director Steve Powers has looked at that and investigated that, and he's indicated that it would ball fields would be an acceptable use for that property. What we can't do is develop like a stadium that would concentrate the noise. So it is not within a noise zone that would not permit ball fields.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions. Anyone else? Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
If there are no other questions, I would move to approve the resolution for a recreation and conservation office grant in the amount of $350,000 to provide a portion for the funding necessary to acquire the 75 acres.
Second.
Okay, so we've got a motion to approve the resolution for a Recreation Conservation Office RCO grant, the amount of $350,000 to provide a portion of the funding necessary to acquire 75 acres of vacant land. Motion by Mayor Pro Tem and second by Councilor Wassinger. Any other input or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Okay, thank you. We got it. Thank you, Councilor Heisen. We got it. Okay, we are now going to move on down to contracts. We'll go to item number 8A, the 2018 citywide auctioneer services. I see we still have our Public Works Director.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. What you have before you tonight is an agreement with Harold Mather, Inc., auctioneers of Spanaway, to provide auctioneer services for the citywide auction this year. The auction date has been set for June 30th, Saturday, June 30th, and there will be a preview on Friday, June 29th. We have used Mr. Mather in the past, and he's done an excellent job for the city. The services that he will provide include, but aren't limited to, setup and layout of the merchandise, advertising via printed brochures and newspaper ads, and crew and staff for setup, and then all of the auction day duties. There will be a 10% buyer's premium charged to the buyer at the time of purchase as part of the auctioneer's compensation. That's pretty standard when you go to auctions. The labor and advertising costs for this will not exceed $8,750, and it will be spread amongst all parties involved. As you can see in your agenda packet, Oak Harbor School District, Island County, South Whidbey Parks and Recreation District, the town of Coopville, the city of Mukilteo, and North Whidbey Fire and Rescue would also like to participate in this auction with us, and we will be bringing forward interlocal agreements with all of those agencies at a future council meeting so that they can participate. So that the advertising and labor costs, or the advertising costs, will be spread amongst all those participating in the auction. The auctioneer's commission rate will be a 9% flat commission on the gross of the sales, and he will also get that buyer's premium. We are recommending that council authorize and approve the agreement with Harold Mather, Inc. auctioneers due to their past performance and excellent reputation. Thank you.
Okay, anyone from the public? Any questions, input? Okay. Back to the council. Yes, Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. So just to clarify, we front up to 8,750, and then we will do interlocals to collect some of that back from the other agencies? Or our share is up to 8,000?
No, the total is $8,750, and then that gets divided amongst the participants. So all of the other agencies and the city of Oak Harbor will split that cost.
Okay, but we don't have to front that, or we do? And then we collect it back from the other agencies?
It comes out of the proceeds.
Okay.
So they don't get their money that same day. There's a whole accounting procedure that we go through in making sure everybody gets their money, their proceeds, and we get our money back.
Okay.
Councilor Allenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Rosen, the gross 9% on the commission, does that include sales tax on top of the gross, or is that without sales tax on the gross?
That I don't know, but I can get back to you.
It'd be kind of interesting if we're paying another 9% on top of sales tax. I would like to know that.
Okay.
And if it's not clear in the contract, can you make it clear that it doesn't include the sales tax?
Sure.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Servadius.
Well, Mr. Holmberg just asked a great question. Is that here in the contract then? Can we, we're looking at a contract here, correct? You're asking us to approve this, but then you're asking for a change to that contract, so.
All trying to find the page that it's on, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it.
Yeah, it's on page 264. It's not really clear. Says that the fee for conducting the auction is 9% of the gross sales plus expenses for labor and advertising necessary to complete this project as listed above. Does not break out sales tax, says gross sales.
I don't know how strongly you feel, Mr. Holmberg, if you want to move on that, or if we want to.
Well, I think we've got to move forward on it. We'll let the legal make that decision. Since it's not included, it doesn't say that gross includes sales tax. We probably don't have to pay commission on sales tax.
I almost feel like this is more of a Patricia question, like the definition of gross, right?
Well, yes, Councilor Servadius.
The auction is until June 30th. We could get an answer to this and bring it back to the next meeting.
Sure.
You want to do that? We'll just table it until the next meeting?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then we are now at 8B, which is the 2018 Water Main Replacement Project Construction Contract Award to C. Johnson Construction. And we have our city engineer, Joe Stoll.
Mayor, council
Welcome, Joe.
members, thanks for having me here tonight. Although Steve Powers reminded me that you really don't have a choice. You get me or you get me, but that's all right. I appreciate you having me here anyway. So this is a presentation for the 28 Water Main Replacement Project construction contract. Just a little bit of background. This project is one of those identified in our 2014 water system plan. It's included in our capital improvement plan, as well as funded in the water fund budget this cycle. And one of the key things that this project does, in addition to creating another, setting the stage for a new water zone in the northwest, it replaces some of the older lines in town and hits it actually in some of the streets that are poor condition as well. So project background, December 5th, we came to council, and council authorized a contract with Gray & Osborne to prepare a design and provide construction services. On March 13th, we came back to council to authorize us to go out and solicit bids, and we did so, and we opened bids on April 3rd. And the project itself, if you're not familiar, it's in the northwest quadrant. It's on O'Leary from about from 10th to 5th, and then a section of 4th and 6th from O'Leary to Midway. And that map's in the packet as well. It's about 5,000 feet of new main, 6 new hydrants, and about 36 meters are going to be replaced, just to kind of give you a scale of the work that's at hand. So the engineer's estimate of cost on this was about $1.5 million. And you can see the spread on we had good turnout on the bids. We did things a little bit differently this year than we did last. We spent a lot of effort, as you can see, between awarding the contract with Gray & Osborne and producing plans and the bid period. And I'm already standing here talking about award of bid. That was all intentional. Worked really hard with Jack Smith and Alex Warner in my office. Really pushed this one forward, knowing how important it is to get bids out early, because this is the result you get. Last year, when we put it out to bid late in close to June, the bids came in very close to the engineer's estimate, and we only had one bid. This time, we got the bids out early. We worked with the contractors to kind of find the right mix of what needed to make it work for them, and we got good bids to reflect that. So just total project cost, I think that's been key to know to bring that up. So design costs were just at $70,000. Services during construction will be about $20,000. Construction, we had, if we award tonight, just a touch over $1 million. And the management reserve is in the action item. That allows me to authorize change orders above and beyond what the construction contract is to prevent any delays in the project. And that's pretty typical for the construction project. So that would lead us to a total project cost of about $1.2 million. And that's the presentation. If you have any questions on it, I'd be glad to answer them.
Okay, see if we have any questions from the audience. Any? Yes. Mr. Hovey, Hal Hovey.
There was a comment about it adding a pressure zone in the northwest. That's the northeast side of town. How does it do that in the northwest side?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hovey. I did mean northeast. I was mistaken. I'm sorry.
Okay, any other? How about council? Questions, input? Yes, Councilor Wiesner.
Mr. Stowell, I just got to say, I'm pleased to see actually an estimate coming in below the estimate amount, or a bid coming in below the estimate amount. I know we've had conversations about the difference between estimates and bids and budgets. And I'm also glad to see that it was with a local contractor. I think you hit on something very important when you talked about the timing of the bid, getting the bid out early so that the contractors have time to get it in, putting the effort in up front, which obviously resulted in significant savings to the city. I appreciate the efforts on the front side of the bid to, I'm assuming there was probably some value engineering that went in there and some work between you and the consultants to do that. So I appreciate that. I'm glad to see it's gone to a local contractor, and I'm glad to see it's come in under estimate. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Wassinger.
Yes. So you can confirm for me that the appropriation is the Water Fund 401 for this project?
That's correct.
And was this budgeted in our current budget cycle? Was this a project that we knew was going to come and is
Yes.
part of that budget for the Water Fund? Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, could you show the map again? I just had one small question. So we're going down to Midway in two sections. Is the Northeast 4th Avenue connection doesn't look like it connects to what's on O'Leary? Is that on purpose, or?
It'll connect to the water line that's in O'Leary.
Well,
It's
I figured it would, but the actual job will go all the way down to Northeast 4th on that blue line on O'Leary, or is there a section there that's already been done?
no, at this phase of work will stop at 5th on O'Leary.
Any reason that it didn't go on down to 4th?
Well, we were trying to balance the budget that we had against the cost estimate, and that's where we had the lines that were most eminent of failure. So that's
Okay.
no specific reason other than just trying to balance the workload.
Okay. Okay. Any other? Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. No other comments? I would move to approve the recommended action as it's displayed on the screen and written in our packet.
Second.
So we've got a motion to approve the action as recommended on the screen up there. Motion by Councilor Servadius, second by Councilor Wassinger. Seeing no other questions or input, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Stoll. We will move on to item number 8C, which is Clean Water Facility, GMP number 13. And you get to do this also. Good.
Mayor, council members, thank you for letting me get started on an easy one tonight, and we'll move on to the more difficult one, but that's okay. It's part of the process and good discussion. So I'm not going to go into extreme detail in the presentation on things that we've already covered in the workshop, if that's okay. I don't think anybody's in favor of another really long presentation on this, so I'll hit on some of the key points. If you have questions that you'd like to go back to from the workshop, I'd be glad to answer any of them. And later in the presentation, I answer some of the key questions that I've heard come up. So if you're patient with me towards the end, I have hopefully some answers to the questions that I heard at the workshop. So the amendment itself is broken into really two parts: the must-haves, which are attributable to the sewer fund, and the park improvements, which would be paid for by the general fund. We went through an extensive process to come up with the park plan that we have. The Windjammer Park Integration Plan was a group effort by some volunteers from the community. We kind of solicited a few and had some volunteers, and worked out really well. Moving right along, when I did the presentation at the workshop, that was in draft form. So we've revised it, and that is in the GMP 13 recapitulation that's in the packet. This is just a roll-up summary of it. If you really wanted to, you could compare the bottom line of $12,405,000 versus $12,830,000. We've moved some things around that made sense. We moved some of the specified general conditions from the general fund over to sewer fund because we were going to be out there working on the sewer fund items anyway. This also takes into account removing a couple, let me move on. That also takes into account deferring the maintenance building to a future phase, not lining the inside of the manholes that are inside the clean water facility yard. It also includes not importing soil, which to feather in the grading. We thought at one point we're going to need about $84,000 worth of import. We said we'll use what we have. That's stopped there. What's not reflected in the cost that I'm showing you here is the savings that we're looking for with the reduced topsoil depth and potential changes to some of the lighting. We were going to use some light standards. We're looking at potential different light standards that might cost a little bit less as well. So point being is that we're continuing to look for ways to reduce the overall project cost. So this slide here, it's very similar to the one that Brett showed earlier, but it includes an estimate for GMP 13. So what that does is it increases the estimated construction cost and brings the total up to $148 million. And now this is strictly the elements that are attributable to the clean water facility. It does not include the general fund items. Those are tracked separately. So if you try and compare the math between what's shown up here and what's in the recapitulation and the Windjammer Park improvements, you might want to come sit down and talk with me, but this is correct for what we've shown in the past. So this, I kind of condensed what Patricia showed at the workshop. So what we have is an additional amount of funding that we need to pull to finance the additional cost. And what we talked about at the workshop was pulling that out of the sewer fund cash reserves. This is capital reserves that were built in. That's why we were ramping up our rates over the last several years to build up this cash balance for this purpose. This is not delving into operating reserves, just to be clear. So it will draw down the cash reserves from about 12 million to about 6.5. So this is what I showed at the workshop, and just to clarify what we've done is those are the maintenance building has been deferred. We're going to come up with a different way to procure picnic tables and trash cans. We have left landscape maintenance in there. That's important because as we install all this new landscaping, we want to make sure that they're responsible for that maintenance through the warranty period. These items here in the text really didn't show up very well, but the West Kitchen and Pavilion, we have an economic development grant submitted to the county. So if anybody has friends at the county and would like to ask them for help on that, I'm doing a minor solicitation here, but that's the only way those structures will get built with this particular phase of the park improvements. If the grant doesn't come through, we'll just have to push those forward to another phase of improvements and keep moving along. So what we do have is the hardscape, landscape, and electrical that we showed before with the splash park, and the landscape maintenance, which condenses down. And if we add in everything, we're looking at right at 2.7 million for the things we intend to do with this contract today. And if we should get the grant, we would do more. The dollar amount at the bottom includes a 5% contingency, 4.28% fee, and 8.7% sales tax. So that's the all-in for general fund to get us through the additional elements for the park, Windjammer Park Phase 1. And this delves in this slide again is one that, so what cash do we have available in the Windjammer Park Fund? About 2 million, a little over. And with the improvements that I just represented, we're about $711,000 short. And when we were at the workshop, we says, well, how can we fund that? There's the potential of using the Stability Fund. So that's what Resolution 18-13 is. It's following this. That's why we moved it around in the agenda. So that immediately follows this agenda item, so that if we approve GMP 13 as it's presented today, we would need to follow through with Resolution 18-13, which would transfer the money necessary over to the Windjammer Park Fund. So, questions. This is a good one that came up that I've had a lot of fun conversations about. What is the $850,000 earthwork allowance all about? Back when we did GMP 10 in the late 2016, we included a $375,000 earthwork allowance. And it was based on pretty limited information, and I was trying to capture how to show this. So I found this is an aerial photograph from November of 16. That's the state of the site at the time. So we were very early. We had the floor and the exterior walls just barely coming together, some of the interior walls going up. A lot going on. Hadn't really got into demolition of the old facility yet, just to kind of give you a snapshot of where we were. This is the level of detail in the design drawings. This is one sheet out of several hundred, but it gives you an idea of the detail that Hoffman was working with when trying to come up with an allowance for the earthwork that would be necessary. So it was a guess, a very as good of guess as they could make at the time. So it's really more than just earthwork. It really should be called site work in my mind, because of what they're providing. It's everything you need to move dirt and install pipe that allowance helps with. And examples, these are some photos I got from Dan Williams with KBA. All the foundation around the micropiles, that's part of that. Putting material into the bottom so that we could create that foundation for the concrete. That's all part of the work that's included. You can see we're installing a sizable line here between aeration and headworks. That's all part of it. And then backfilling between the sheet piles and the exterior wall of the plant, that's part of it as well. So I got this impression when we were talking about earthwork that there was some guy running around in a backhoe moving dirt from one pile to another. It's much more detailed than that and much more complex, and it's been going on since November. And Hoffman has been carrying it in that line item for GMP 10, and if you look in the, if you want to, you don't have to, but if you look back into the report that we provided at the last pay request that came through, GMP 10 is in the rears. It's $500,000 upside down because we've been spending it on doing necessary work that they didn't have detailed plans for at GMP 10. So what that means is if, and how we're able to fund that and actually pay them for the work, we have paid them for the work, is that the total contract amount still is within check. But at some point, we got to correct this allowance. So the key point in this, and it's part of the contract that we have with Hoffman, is that adjustments to allowances are, by contract, can be by change order. And they have the right to do that, and it's very clear in the contract that they have that ability. We chose to do it through a GMP and bring it forward now. Quite frankly, poor timing, but that's the best way we felt of dealing with it when it was coming about before. So next question, why does the kitchen structure cost so much? And that I hear, I get it. And if we talk specifically about the West Kitchen, it covers over 4,000 square feet. That's a reasonably sized footprint if you think about it for a moment, if you compare it to the footprint of your house. There's 2 internal preparation areas and seating areas inside. And, there's the associated, hot water heater and sink, and there's electrical outlets, benches and lighting, a number of items that you might expect. And I got this, I almost pulled this quote directly from Trevor Teese with Hoffman. Think of what you would expect from at a national park. Something that uses natural materials. It's substantial construction. It has some heft to it. It's long-term durability. We don't want to have to be going down there and trying to figure out how to maintain this on a regular basis. It's going to last us. And on top of all that, it needs to be warm and inviting. So, it's not just a bunch of stacked blocks with a flat roof on top. And the design is not, and I've heard the other reason, the other potential reason for the cost being high is, man, the design's just over the top. They over-designed this thing, that's why the bids came in so high. Mind you, there were 2 bidders on it, and we did go with low bidder. That's what's shown in the, and it's a local contractor. So we're using standard building materials that you would find on any normal construction project. CMU block, standard standing seam metal roof, glulam timber, all very similar to what, and on purpose, to what we're using with the clean water facility. We picked a theme when we went out through the public process. The theme carries over into the kitchen and throughout the park. It was done on purpose. And we have talked about this before, and I get a little bit of scoffs here and there about this is a prevailing wage job. We were talking earlier, about 50% of the project cost is materials and about 50% is labor. And when you consider, a prevailing wage job is not the same as a private job. There's not only additional wages, but additional overhead for working on a public contract. So with that, I will stop. And I did fail to put an action up there, but it is in the agenda packet. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to take them.
Before we do that, I'll see if the public would like to weigh in or raise a question. Okay, seeing none, let's bring it to the council. Councilor Wassinger.
Yes, my first question is just a mathematical question, footing some of the pages in our packet. So page 280, it's just the cost of work breakdown. Has the total GMP for this amendment, when you add up the sewer fund and the general fund, of 16,063. And our agenda is asking for, it's roughly 17 million when you add in the tax.
I can explain that if you'd like.
Oh, okay, but then the general fund, you had mentioned that we knocked off some of the things to bring it to the 2 million, but in here it's still the 4 million. So I'm just trying to match up the elements and make sure that I'm not missing something, or see how that
No,
adds up. Okay.
You're doing fine, and it's an issue that we've, I think, all internally struggled with. It's a bad page break.
Okay.
If you flip to the next page, you'll see that it adds on Washington State sales tax.
Oh, okay.
And
Oh, there. I'm sorry.
That should help.
Yes,
and that's
it
also
does.
up on the
Thank you.
overhead, and you'll see that. And that was I had the same thing when I was working on the presentation, so I can completely understand.
Okay, but so I see now too where it adds up to the 17 million, but the general fund on this page, even on the next page over on the page break, is 4.6 million. But what was your slide that you'd got that down to the 2.7 million, I believe? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so what we've done is broke this. How did it end up 2.7?
Yes.
Okay, that's because the West Kitchen and pavilion structure are currently unfunded. The only way we can construct those is if we get the economic development grant, and we have written the contract in such a way that it's included in the total project cost when you look at the recapitulation, but it can't be done until we authorize it and have received the funding to do so.
So the bid package that's on our agenda bill to approve does include those two, the West Kitchen and the Pavilion. It's just subject to getting the grants. Is that a summary that
That's exactly
you agree
it.
with? Okay, thank you. So for me, the total 17 million, I just want to run through like some major things. It includes all the hardscaping, landscaping, splash park, West Kitchen, Pavilion, any restrooms.
For Portland
Loos. And that includes all of the landscaping, getting that grass back together in the main common area, and our beautiful pictures, the landscaping. Is that correct?
What it doesn't include is the maintenance building.
Yes.
And if we don't put in the West Kitchen and Pavilion, they would be grass in that area. We'd try to bring them to grade and have them ready, but it would be grass instead. So
then-
yes, everything else.
Okay, and then another overall question, just for construction and timing purposes for our community. If we approve this tonight with these wonderful items, the park, as we all know, and it's a concern, will be shut down for the duration of this summer. Is, if we were to approve this tonight, would that be the conclusion of shutting down the park for our community? I understand if we come back with getting some more funding to add another kitchen or some of these things that we're leaving off, that those sections may be, but would this conclude shutting down the park use, the majority of the park use for our community members to use for 4th of July and Holland Happening and any other special events, the marathon that we may want to do down there?
You know, that's a really good question and something that's come up quite a few times, and we've worked really hard with our contractor and Enviro Issues on how to message things and how to coordinate the work so that we have the maximum use of the park but still are able to get our job done. So we're very conscious of it. I can't make any promises, but what I can say is that as areas become available, we'll retreat that fence line so that more of the park is usable. But at the start of it, we're going to have to put the fence out, and so we can move that big dirt pile, because one of the first things we have to do is put a water line underneath where it's at, the dirt pile is now.
And I understand that, and I think that's a very reasonable thing that for me as a community member, I am okay with saying to our community that in order to make these improvements to our park, that one summer is not unreasonable to me. But what would be is that if we kept dragging it on and it was unusable the next summer and the next summer, so that's sort of what I would like to get some confirmation that we could avoid, even if we are just to approve this one section tonight, this one part. If you had do you have a picture of the park on your?
You know, I didn't think to include it this time.
A lot of these are done sort of in that main, open space in the park that we have now that's still included in the design. What in this package is all of that area to be seeded and starting to grow grass and be sort of complete that whole main open area where we all run around and enjoy the sunshine, like where the big metal covered part is now.
Let's just say that everybody's eager to get it done as quick as possible. There are several steps that are involved. I mean, you have to move the material, then there's pulling topsoil. In between there, you have putting irrigation in and doing the concrete work. I'm hesitant to I'm kind of maybe speaking out of turn, but I'm hesitant to start planting until I know we're done digging, so that we don't tear up something we just got done spending money on planting. But with that in mind, we're going to try and pull things back as quickly as we can.
I'm sorry, I have further questions for that. So you're uncomfortable, not included in this phase is sort of the trail, if I'm correct, sort of along the waterfront. Right now we have the old asphalt or concrete path. So you're hesitant to reopen some of those areas that are future?
Okay, maybe I
Future
misunderstood
phases?
the question.
I'm sorry.
I misunderstood the question,
Okay.
I'm sorry. So the waterfront trail, we intend to keep that open throughout construction. And I hope that helps. It might meander around from time to time as we need to work in a particular area, especially since the splash park goes so close to the waterfront. But I'm hoping that helps answer your question. Did I get there?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to just sort of know the scope of what is going to be completed this summer if we approve this package. Is the lawn going to be back ready for next summer?
That's our goal. Our goal is to
Yeah.
have the bulk of the work done by the end of the year and just clean up in spring.
Okay. So I wanted to speak to, I was in the workshop a little hesitant, as you mentioned, with some of the prices of these items. They are expensive. This package is expensive, and it's a little bit of a hard pill to swallow. But I also know that I want to get this park done. When I applied for the job and I stood up there, it was one of my top 3 priorities, if you remember, was to make sure that this park was remodeled and done right, because I'm a young person, I have young kids, and I want this park to be just the best feature in this city as far as a public space goes that we can control. I wasn't on council when it was decided to put the wastewater treatment plant where it is, so I can't speak to that as much, but I know that was a priority for the council members that were there, that this park be improved and completed. So I looked and thought, well, I also want to be reasonable. I don't want to approve something that is an unreasonable cost, a burden for our taxpayers and our general fund and our wastewater fund. So I did some research, looking to see what other cities may have done, if there's any cities that have done a major park remodel recently. And one of the only ones I could find was the city of Redmond. And they did a 2-acre park. Can you tell me how many acres Windjammer Park is?
12 and a half of improvements that we're looking at right now.
12 and a half acres that we're improving right now. So that doesn't include the ball fields. That's
Correct.
just the space that we're touching right now. So the city of Redmond did a downtown park, and that park is 2 acres. And the total construction cost that the city of Redmond is spending on that park is $41.2 million. That includes $20 million of acquiring the land and some of the spaces to improve that park. The design and construction alone on that park is $18.9 million. And that park includes a splash park, a lawn, a pavilion, a garden, some restrooms, a plaza, some tables and chairs for a nice dining area, and restrooms. And that's it. That's what that park includes. So for me, my biggest thought process as a council member is what we're doing reasonable? We know it's what we want to do. We have been through the public process for this park. We know the public has picked the designs and invested so much of their time. So after talking to the project lead in the city of Redmond yesterday, and how they went about their process of doing their park, their 2-acre park, I feel comfortable that this is reasonable. I'm comfortable with the bids that we received. I'm glad to see local companies that bid on these items. And it's something that I want to get done, and it's something that that I feel more comfortable with now. So that is my thinking for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wassinger. Who wants to go next? Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Stowell, I do have some questions first on the sewage treatment plant part of GMP 13, understanding that we're really talking about two separate things. We're talking about the finishing of the sewage treatment plant, which does include some Windjammer Park work, but it comes out of the budget for the sewage treatment plant. And then I understand we have some of the improvements, such as those improvements you've got up there that are actually part of the park project. When it comes to the sewer plant, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this final budget correctly. In the monthly report that you gave us, it has a budget amount listed, I guess an estimate amount, because we don't do budgets. And it shows an amount of around $140 million. That's prior, of course, to this awarding of GMP 13. But down at the bottom, it has a subnote number 1, which says this includes the $5.3 million that is the original estimate of GMP 13. But does not include that, and it does not also include GMP 2. Is there a reason that GMP is left out of that, and are the figures you're giving us here in front of us including all GMPs?
That is a really great question, and it's being consistent with what we've done in the past. So when you look at if you look at the recapitulation, let's say page 281 in the packet, the pre-construction services, the $790,000, that's actually up in professional services design, because that was value engineering and construction services prior to construction, really. And then the other one that we've, to be consistent, the way we've shown these numbers at 30 and 60%, the outfall was not shown at that time. So GMP2 is not reflected in the number you see up there either, because that would have had to be done regardless of the clean water facility. So that's, maybe I should have noted that more clearly, and we should have that up there on every time, but that's what we've done consistently up to this point.
So let me make sure I understand it. So you are accounting for that $1.9 million, but you're counting it for it in the soft costs versus the hard costs, or is it just nowhere in any of the figures we're dealing with here?
The figure that you're looking at right now does not include the 1.9 for the outfall.
I thought we were pretty clear at the workshop that it was important to include. I think that's what caused some of our confusion, or at least that's what we're being told by staff caused some of the issues with the $20 million confusion that happened, is that we were talking hard costs, soft costs. We weren't presenting things in a clear picture. So you're saying the outfall, which had to be done outside the sewage treatment plant, but was done during the sewage treatment plant project and was done through a GMP of the sewage treatment plant, is not included in the sewage treatment plant costs, that $1.9 million?
Not what we're tracking here, and that's the way we've presented it in the past.
Okay. As a new member to council, past for me is the last 3 months. I just feel as though we keep digging and we keep finding out. I do have a couple of questions about the $850,000 transfer. You say that work has been finished, already paid. When was it completed and paid for?
Over the course of the last year, on multiple occasions, there's been payments towards that.
So there's been multiple payments being made that should have, or at least via the contract, stated they should have been done through a change order, but instead we've just kind of been paying this and pushing it forward. I mean, I'm just kind of curious as to why it's all being bundled here now at the end and shoved into this GMP, if this has been going on for, it looks like about 18 months. And I'm assuming the majority of it was done during the whole excavation, which we've been completed with for quite some time.
Yeah, well, you want to? I'm going to ask Trevor Teese with Hoffman to come up and help.
Thank you,
explain.
Trevor.
Trevor Teese with Hoffman Construction. So, one thing to be clear, the work is not yet done. The $850,000 that we've put in GMP 13 is the projected reconciliation of that allowance, which also takes into account absorbing about $138,000 from our risk contingency, just to not request any more funding than we need to reconcile the allowance. But I think we're about 2.5 months from finishing the work that is being performed under that allowance. The contract states that the allowance will be reconciled via change order. So the reconciliation it could have been a deductive change if we were at the end of the contract, or it'd be an additive change. But it doesn't state, well, it simply states it that way, that we'll reconcile by change order. The method thought to be the most efficient was to bring it forth in this amendment to the contract, since this is the final GMP amendment to the contract. At least we hope it is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Mr. Stowell, has there been any other allowances pushed forward from one GMP to another during this?
You know, the only thing I can think of would be negotiated support services. Anything that's carried in there is a lump for all of the GMPs.
We had to push forward that pipeline that went down the street, so.
You want to talk to that, Brett?
There was one, excuse me, it's Brett Arvidsson. We had one other allowance that we had an allowance in there, then we actually bid it, and the price came in high. And so what was for that pipe that went down City Beach? The outfall. Yeah, it was part of the outfall where we came up City Beach, and that we actually had put an allowance in, then we bid it, and the price came in higher, so we did a reconciliation with that in a later GMP. I think it was 6.
Okay, thank you for that. I will comment just on that briefly. I am just concerned that you know, we've basically spent $850,000 without council's approval. You know, I mean, the money's basically been spent, they've been paid, and now we're it's okay. Well, is it okay that we already spent the money? So I'm just concerned about that. Hoping that it's not a ongoing issue, because I think it could have been presented in a little different fashion other than shoved into this GMP. That's just my 2 cents there. I guess I want to move on to the park, which is a very, very touchy subject for me. And quite frankly, it's one of the reasons I decided to step up and be on council. You know, I've got other things in town that I do, and you know, when asked to serve on council, I felt as though Windjammer Park was a chance for us to leave a legacy for our children and our grandchildren. It's one of the reasons I'm here, so please, you know, take my comments as such from a guy who's passionate about his hometown, the place he grew up in and raised his children in, and plan on raising his grandchildren in, okay? So with that said, before I start my questions, I do want to tell a quick little story. I went down to City Beach Park on Sunday. And it wasn't a nice day. It wasn't a big sunny day or anything else. And I just wanted to go down and walk the park and really take the time to think about this, because it is something that's been weighing on me heavily. And I was shocked. Every parking spot was full. I stopped counting when I reached 120 people, and there was several more to go. I would certainly estimate there was 200 people in the park. on a Sunday afternoon, cloudy, drizzly. I then took the opportunity to stop and just talk to some of the people using the park, and I approached probably north of a dozen folks that I didn't know, and just asked if they were enjoying the park, and then I proceeded to ask them if they knew about the park closing, they knew what was going on in the park. A lot of shocked people. I heard a lot of stories of plans for family reunions and cousins coming, and what about the 4th of July, and a lot of shocked people, folks. I don't know that we've done a real good job of communicating what's going on to our community. Earlier today, I ran into a person that I work with who happened to mention that she had heard rumor of this, and she then posted a Facebook post, and my Facebook's been blowing up with people who are just shocked that they're hearing for the first time that the park is closing for this entire summer. And so I just want to let you know that I've been doing the work. I've been out talking to the people. I'm disappointed that there's not more people here tonight to talk to this matter. I quite frankly, again, I'm proud of my community for last Wednesday night, not so proud of it for tonight. So I have a couple of questions with that prefaced. When we close the park, when will the work start? I mean, are these contractors geared up? I mean, we keep hearing that time is of the essence, time is of the essence. This is seasonal work. We need to get this stuff done during a particular time. My fear is that we're going to gate the park off, and then we're going to be sitting there waiting for contractors, and people are going to go down there and they're going to see somebody working for a day, and then nobody working for a week, and then somebody working for a day and nobody working for a week. Can you kind of address that concern, please?
That was a concern of mine that I brought up very early in the process. We have to come at this from two different ways. One, when we put out a bid package, we need to be able to tell the contractors what area they have to work in. And you've seen the aerial map that has the red on it that shows what parts of the park could be fenced off. We've seen that in the past. That's what we handed out to the contractors. Now, as representatives of the project, we all know that once we sit down with the contractors and work out the schedule, that we're going to put out the fencing that's necessary to do the work. And as we can, like I mentioned before, as we can pull that fence back, we will. But we want to maintain an efficiency so we can get in and out of there as quickly as possible. And sometimes that takes a little bit of space to do that.
Okay, thank you. I guess another comment before the next question. The way I kind of look at this, we started this whole project with a park with mature landscaping, a gazebo, nothing fancy, but we could get a band under there. They got one outlet, as long as their amps aren't too big, it doesn't pop the circuit breaker. Kitchen space that we've all used for many years, and an RV park. And it sounds to me like if we don't get this county grant, we're going to end up with no kitchen on the west side of the park, no RV park, no gazebo, no auditorium, new landscaping instead of the mature landscaping. I kind of feel like we're going backwards. Certainly we're going to have some fancier stuff, but I just feel like we're going backwards. So, back to Councilmember Wassinger's comment about doing it right. I have to question that. So, with that in mind, I'm kind of curious why. This project's been going on for 2 years. Why we've never really sought any funding for the part of the park that the previous councils promised to bring to the public. We were able to go out and fund the sewer treatment plant. In fact, we received more funding than what the original bids were. Now we find ourselves spending almost exactly the amount on the plant that we got funded, even though it was more than we originally had expected to fund. Kind of seems a little odd. Yet during this entire deal, we're getting all these grants and we're getting all this stuff, yet we're having to reach into our reserves to fund just a portion of what it's going to take to put the park back to less than what we started with. Is there a reason why we're just now applying for these grants and stuff for this important part of the project?
Timing is everything. RCO grants are a pretty standard resource for us to go after. They're only available every other year. They were delayed or deferred due to the capital budget. The timing of actually having a submittal ready to turn in, we're out of sync with the RCO grants, and they're the primary source for us on something like this. And we are applying for grants with the Economic Development Fund. That's what those two, we worked hard to get a grant turned in for those. And it's time, I believe the next submittal for RCO is coming up here real quick, and they're very substantial grants. That's one of them was what Kathy was up here talking to you about earlier. So now that we have Windjammer Park Integration Plan and we have some substance, I agree with you. We should go after, and this isn't the last phase, this is the first phase. You know, these elements that may not get constructed or that you're wishing for to be done, let's go hunt down funds. Let's talk to anybody and everybody and see if we can scrounge up what we need to do, a pavilion or a stage at the other end, or the next phase of work.
Did we, you know, we talked earlier about value engineering and the work that was done on the front side of the bid for the waterline project in the northeast section of town. Did we do any of that for this? I mean, was this a free rein for the architect and designer, or did we sit down and really work on trying to use materials and you know, construction methods that could possibly either garner more competitive bids or still a good quality product, but maybe at a less cost?
You know, we've worked with our architect for quite some time in the lead up to the clean water facility itself. I can't tell you the number of iterations we went through on architectural designs and public meetings and feedback on, do you like this versus this? And I think they're providing to us what we've asked them to provide, and I do not think that it's over the top. I think it's appropriate for us.
And we did that with the kitchens and the bathrooms. I know that we're using Portland Lou's landscaping, those type of issues. Okay. And then briefly back to the sewage treatment plant, actually the entire, I guess, budget thing. Soft costs for the sewage treatment plant. You know, we're presenting these final figures, which includes acquisition, administration, finance. You know, we've talked a lot about construction costs. Are all of our soft costs calculated in? Do we know what all of those are now? And we're pretty firm with that number, that we're not going to have some additional soft costs pop up?
Well, you know, I'm going to answer that one cautiously because I have yet to do a little bit of homework, but I think we might have another couple of consultant contracts to bring up to date to get us through the end of construction. I don't have a dollar amount to share with you. I don't believe it's anything substantial.
Okay, and then just two last questions. Honestly, I appreciate everybody's patience. Startup. Is it typical for one of these plants? I mean, we've got it's a pretty complicated piece of equipment. Obviously, we spent $150 million. I would think as a layman that we're not just going to walk into this thing and flip a switch and everything is going to come on and work and function and everything's just going to just be great. Do we have some exposure there to some additional costs during startup I'm really concerned. I mean, we've maxed out all the money that we've gotten for appropriations here, even though we went 20-some million dollars over what the original bids. We've garnered this much financing. That's all gone. I mean, where do we go from here if there are some additional soft costs and if there are some issues at startup, and we've even talked about the dryer plant having some probably additional costs involved. Where do we go from here?
You know, it's a really good question, and while you were asking that, I was going through my head things that could go wrong during startup, and all of them revert back to a pump not getting the right signal or needing to revise the controls. I can't see anything that's like replacing an entire concrete wall or replacing the roof on something. It's all getting things to work together. So I don't know if you guys can think of anything that else that might be at risk during startup. That it's all seems like just getting things to work together than more than anything.
We are concerned about, we are carrying reserves for in our risk contingency. It doesn't come to council, it's in risk contingency.
So you probably couldn't hear Trevor, but we're carrying, that's what the risk contingency is there for. The GCCM risk contingency is to cover issues that might come up like that. And
So we shouldn't be expecting any more requests for funds with the treatment plant?
the only caveat of the consultant
I know,
contracts.
loaded question, huh?
It is.
Appreciate you're in the hot seat again. Okay, the final question, because I promised only one more. What if we just stopped? What would happen if we did just what we need to get that sewage treatment plant online? We stabilized the mound of dirt, went back out for bid, and I know everybody's concerned, oh my gosh, the bids could come in more, and I get that we have a risk and exposure there. I think the northeast water line is a perfect example. It's all about getting the right contractors, getting the right amount of time for the bids, maybe putting in some of that value engineering up front. What if we just said, enough for now? We've got to regroup.
I'm assuming this is somewhat a rhetorical question, but it would be a catastrophe.
Meaning?
Meaning that it would push the startup of the plant off time-wise. It would increase the cost, not just for bids that we have received, but for contractors we currently have on site.
You're saying we couldn't start up the plant without moving that pile of dirt?
No, well, we can't take operation of that because the water line that provides fire service goes underneath that pile. Streets and access to the site are imperative. We have to tear down the Whidbey Island Bank building to finish the fire loop.
Well, and I understand the Whidbey Island Bank building needs to come down one way or the other. That bid actually came in, I think, below engineers' estimates. And that parking lot needs to be completed, which gives you access to the plant. But the giant mound of dirt, okay, which is going to trigger the removal of all the trees in the park and the closing of the park that we now have to do immediately, and we need to shut it down with the public not really being even aware that's all happening. All that has to happen in order to get the plant open?
My professional opinion is that everything that's listed that's paid for by the sewer fund in the recapitulation needs to be done to satisfy our permit requirements and start the plant.
Including the $299,000 auto gate?
Yeah.
Without that, we can't fire up a plant, huh? We've got to spend $300,000, almost as much as we're spending on a splash park, on a gate.
Well,
and we can't open the plant without that gate.
If we're talking about a commitment to the community and the security of the site, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And I do believe that's part of our permit requirement too, is the screening of the interior.
That's all. Thank you.
Councilor Olmberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Joe, could you clarify a couple items for me? If you would please go to your landscape, the budget that had the landscape up there. I just have a question on that, $32,000. Now, obviously, I haven't seen the plans or read the bid documents, but typically on landscaping, the landscape contractor would be responsible for the lawn through the first cutting, and there's a warranty period for their plants installation. Do you happen to know off the top of your head what that is?
Oh,
We're paying $32,000 for, that's for the maintenance side of that contract?
yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay, that answers
Sorry,
my
just
question.
so everybody can hear that
That
we asked
answers
them
my
to break it
question.
out.
Okay, you clarified that. Now go back to the photo where you showed the aerial site plan there, about 4 or 5 back. It was the
Where was
photo.
it?
Whoop. Now come back to where those guys are backfilling forward. You had some guys down there between. There you go, right there. Now, I probably misunderstood you, but I need a clarification on this. You say the backfill of the outside of that building is part of the contingency?
No, earthwork allowance,
The 375,000 earthwork allowance?
plus 850.
Okay, so the allowance that we started out with based on 60% design, that was $375,000? Walk me through that again. Something isn't, I thought I understood the whole process before, but now I'm not sure why we went over $850,000.
Trevor, care to help?
You ready?
To the mic, please.
So I'll curse Joe later for just providing you one photo of that, but, so that $375,000 allowance, the ill-fated $375,000 allowance, wasn't, again, set up with an estimate as a background. We basically extended some unit prices that we had received competitively from 2 firms, the firms that had shown the most interest, Interwest and Pelco. That allowance had demolition of the RBC plant, but actually that's a different allowance line in a minute. So it's the capillary break that goes underneath all of the slabs.
Right.
It's the sand that goes under all of the slabs, which is all import material.
Hold it just a second, Trevor.
Okay.
But it did not include the mass excavation, the deep excavation?
It had foundation. It had some foundation excavation for footings.
So it was structural excavation was part of that?
Right. Some structural excavation for instance, the solids building, which is on the footprint of the old RBC plant. It would have been the pad build-up for the administration and maintenance building. It was the structural excavation for the odor control structure, which came along later.
And I understand, because we didn't have the drawings that
Right,
actually
so-
gave you the footprint for that.
So it basically provided us a vehicle to perform all that work as that work became available.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Does that help?
That does help. I was looking at this thinking, when you pointed out that the backfill around the perimeter was part of that work, that is known work at the time of that the perimeter of the building was established. So the way you said it, Joe, just made it sound like we were doing perimeter backfill.
That piece could have been quantified, but it was the other things we couldn't
That's what
quantify.
I'm,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, thanks, that's what I need, okay. Now, all right, I'm going to support GMP 13, and this is why. First of all, we had a bid date opening, I believe, of March 15, correct?
March 1st were the first 5 packages, and March 15th for the 6th.
The first 5 packages, but we have 45 days, as I understand.
That's correct.
To execute a contract, a commitment, right? Okay, but that is, well, we don't have time to go back out to the public on this thing, in my opinion. The other thing is, I would not recommend going out to rebid on these, because I'll tell you why. We received a number of bids on all of these packages, and some of them are local bidders. Bid item number 1, there's a 21% spread between the low bidder and the number 2 bidder. Bid item number 2, there's a 25% spread between the low bid and the number 2 bidder. Bid item number 3, there's a 17% bid spread between the low bidder and the number 2 bidder. Item number 4, there's a 22% spread between the low bidder, number 2. And item number 5, there's a 5% spread. In my opinion, since these bids are on the street, everybody knows each other's numbers right now. You're gonna have the low guy trying to close that gap between those are huge spreads. Those are big spreads. They're gonna try and close that gap, as if the other people decide to bid and try to come down to it, the city doesn't gain on this deal. We simply do not make any progress on the money on this thing. In fact, in my opinion, I think we'd really go back. The other thing on this is the site work it's a seasonal job. The site work needs to be done during the late spring and summer work. This is moisture sensitive work. We have to get the landscape in place for the fall planting, and that grass has to be established. We don't have 2 months to wait. If we went out for the rebid, it probably would delay our start on this work, in my opinion, a minimum of 2 months. I don't see how we gain on that. And then the other part, the final thing with these are unusually low, big numbers, big percentage numbers between the low bid and the next bid. And the beauty of the GCCM system is these are guaranteed maximums. Our contractor's on the hook for this. These are bonded. We have some protection, financial protection between us and that activity out there. If we have a subcontractor that blows up on them, we just look at Hoffman and say, take care of it. I see them sitting over there grudgingly nod their head, yes, but that is the reality of it. And with that, if there's no further conversation on this or questions,
Oh, there is.
I'll pass. Okay.
Councilor
That's all
Servadius.
I have, thank you.
Thank you. I think I've said this twice now. I've had a headache since I first saw these numbers, and I don't think that headache's gone away.
I smashed my car up, by the way, backing out of my garage because I wasn't thinking straight.
I've got some thoughts here, and I'll try.
Well, I'm gonna stay off the road near
Yep.
you.
They don't pay us enough. No, they do pay us plenty. We know what we signed up for. I'm going to try and go through these thoughts in order, and hopefully this makes sense. I have some concerns about this that I have not been able to reconcile in my head, and I'll try and touch on what those are. One thing I'd like to say, staff has been consistent. I know, Mr. Wiesner, you said your past at the moment consists of 3 months, but staff has been consistent on that outfall, why that was included or not included. That messaging has been very consistent. And I had a conversation with someone today. We were talking about turnouts, the Wednesday, the 2 recent forums, community forums. We had a shopping cart ordinance meeting this morning. Great turnout. And I commented to someone, I said, we'll mail out 6,000 postcards in a utility bill and get 5 people to show up to a wastewater treatment plant meeting that affects their utility bills for infinity. We throw out a shopping cart ordinance. We had 12 or 15 people, Mayor, I don't know, sitting here in a room this morning. I'm like, So it's interesting to how do we get people to pay attention, to chime in. You started off saying you appreciate your voices are heard. Your voices are very much appreciated, and they are heard. So it was interesting to have this person say, please don't spend money on postcards. That's stupid. And we've done 3 mailings. We've done multiple mailings. I don't know what those mailings cost us, but we do try very hard to reach out to the public, include them. I've attended all of the workshops, the charrettes. So we've tried very hard there. One of the things that came to mind in the workshop for me when Mr. Allenberg touched on those spreads is I wanted to look more into that and try and understand that. That's not my background of construction. So I looked at specifically the largest line item, which is WJP2 is what I'm calling it. And that was also the highest percentage spread that Mr. Allenberg referenced, 25%. So I went through the packet and I was looking for those numbers. Now, keep in mind the previous item that we just approved, the water line main. If you look at those bid documents, there were 47 line items that gave you a total number. On this, I said, well, okay, let's go look at what those numbers look like. And I pull up a page, and I'm on page 2. I need glasses. Sorry, 280. What's that, number 3? Digital page 283, sorry, going one more. 284. So digitally in our package, page 284, it's the bid package WJP2, site clearing, excavation, utilities, grading, and paving. There's only 3 lines that give you a total bid amount. Should those 3 lines add up? Should those 3 lines add up to the final total bid amount that's listed there?
I mean, they should, I'm assuming you're looking at the same thing I am.
Well, I can't read what's under Valdez. It's 6-70186, I think.
I think that was probably something that came out with the PDF that was printed incorrectly.
Well, I want to look at page 284.
280.
I'm looking at page 284.
284.
Should those 3 line items match up, add up mathematically?
Yes.
None of them do on any.
So on either of those columns, they don't add up. For Inner West or Valdez. So if I take, let's look at Inner West, they're all zeros and they,
Pretty easy.
but let's look, we got 2 8s and a 5, so that's 16 plus 5 is 21, the number below it is a 9. What am I missing?
That's right.
Sales tax.
Just be patient with me for a moment.
Yep.
Yeah, if they're supposed to add up, that's his question. They don't.
Is there something else in the bid package itself that would highlight that? Because this isn't actually the bid tab or the bid that was submitted. It's just the tabulation of the key items that were in the bid. Those are the items that we needed to highlight to determine who was the lowest responsible bidder, not necessarily all the line items. Right, and I don't have that in front of me at the moment, too. So, incorrect in saying that they add up. Sorry for that. I think what's happened is what you're seeing, usually on a bid tab like this, what you're looking for is a summary of the numbers that are necessary to determine who's the lowest responsible bidder. It's not, in this particular case, it's different than what you saw on the 2018 water system improvements, where it showed everything was all laid out in a 2-page summary. This is just the total at the bottom of each key item. You betcha.
We're both off by about 9%, 9.5%.
I apologize for that confusion. You know, we have one of our purchasing guys that actually records the bids as we read them, but we keep the bids too. But for brevity, we don't provide all the bids. The bid actually added up to $4,711,000, and that's what we're representing in the GMP recapitulation. This $4,711,000 for Interwest.
Okay, so my question, Joe and I played phone tag and we talked earlier today, when I have concerns that I can't reconcile in my brain, and I asked specifically, can I see the bid numbers that were behind this? I don't know if you have those or didn't have time to get them for me.
We have those. We could have those to you tonight.
Okay, well, we're supposed to vote, but, so I then thought about and trust me, no one wants to, as Mr. Wiesner said, nobody wants to champion this park more than I do. I have a young family. One of the reasons I voted when I came right on board with council to site the plant where we sited it was to be a catalyst for that whole area. However, I continue to struggle with the costs, and as much as I want the park, I don't want the park improvements, and I'll go a little further into it. I don't want them at this price. one of the arguments that was made was, hey, we're going to save so much money because they don't have to remobilize all these crews. Or, you know, if they're here and they have their workforce here and they can transition right into the next job, that saves us money. Well, the bid package right before this, the high bidder by 50% was then the low bidder on this package. So in my brain, I tried to reconcile, if they're already here, then maybe there's more very specific site conditions or work conditions. But if they're already here, I was surprised they weren't then the low bidder, or even they were 50% higher than the low bid we just awarded. So I couldn't quite reconcile that in trying to get some of these numbers. And I stated statistically for me, 2 bids on some of these, or 3, that might be the norm, but it's not something I can reconcile. I support the must-haves at the moment. I support the concept of what we're going for here. I just can't support the price. So, you know, demolition of the Woodby Island Bank building, I've talked about maybe getting the parking lot graded and put in place, some of those basics. I just believe there's got to be a better way to get some of these done at a better price point. We're spending, if we authorize this 17 million, to do approximately 2/5 to half the park. If that trend were to continue, we're spending $34 to $40 million to renovate a park. And I know there's some very expensive stuff we're trying to do right around the current wastewater treatment plant that wouldn't continue through some of the larger green spaces. Those same cost projections probably wouldn't span through the entire park, but that continues to concern me. And I guess the final question I would ask is, we keep talking about prevailing wage and it's a public job. How do we make it a private job? Can we not sub this out under a development agreement to a private firm?
No, you can't circumvent that. I suppose the only way you might be able to do it is if somebody donated it. It could, as soon as you start using city funds, it falls under public works procurement.
Okay. So I want the public to know that if I don't vote for this tonight, I am hell-bent on supporting getting a park done. I just can't support it right now at these price points I'm seeing with all of the feedback I'm getting. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I'll do some easy questions. So on your, not hard surface,
Hardscape?
hardscape. So all the extra cement for the Portland loos and little things like that, that's all included. That's part of it. And as long as it's all tore up, we need to get the stuff that goes underground so we can cover it up, so that we're saving on that. And I hope that we can provide extra electricity that won't blow fuses, that it will handle amps for musics and things like that. I know we put extra electricity on Pioneer, but it blows circuit breakers. So somehow I hope we can get that solved. I didn't see anything, it's simple, but drinking fountains. I know that when we travel, it's nice to have nice water fountains. Outside, you want something for the dog, but also bottled water feelers, because everybody's into the environment. They bring their own bottled water. You tell the kids on the soccer and the softball team, no cups allowed. You got to bring your own bottled water. So it's just a little thing on that. Let's see. And the grass should be hardy enough that when we open it in a year or next summer, that it will hold carnival ride stuff, and okay, that's good. And I understand the planting season. This project has, and we had grant list on that charrette. They had a whole list of grants, so I imagine you're just meticulously going down. Since we are closer to the final plan, you know, there was some from the forestry department and some of this, so I know that they had done the research, but you're right, the timing is everything. But I think there were like about 15 or 20. I mean, the staff really did their work on where can you get grants and what kind of grants and all that kind of thing. So but a lot of it is you have to have a final project to show them before you can submit. You can't say, hey, we need money for a splash park until you know what it looks like, or need money for this. And so I know that's part of it. But this project has been so different to begin with. I mean, I don't think the city will ever do a project that cost us much. I don't think any of us, including staff, has ever been on a project the scope of this. So it's just hard to wrap your head around it and stuff. The GCCM, we are always to design, bid, open, build. And this has been different where we're working as partners through the whole thing. So it's, other than maybe Hoffman or Corolla, this is all new and in a lot of ways over our heads. I'm sorry. It's just, we just didn't know what education we needed before applying for this. And I think we have done well and we're getting through it. Yeah, it's hard to swallow that. Almost $1 million for a kitchen. I'd like that in my house, but I can understand it now. I understand that it's at National Park standards, that it's not just gonna crumble. I mean, we've kind of gotten used to what we have because we didn't know any better. And until you did that research, Councilman Wassinger, for a 2-acre park that's billions more, I mean, it just seems like billions more than what we're doing. It seems like we're out of price, but I don't think that we are. From the beginning, we wanted something to last. The Waterloos, the restrooms, they're a finish that hopefully the graffiti won't stick. I mean, you can't imagine the hours over really 10 years we've been working on this, the little bits and pieces. But the biggest thing is I didn't want to shortchange. I want the best for the money. We have the Cadillac. It's not a Maserati, but we definitely went for the Cadillac and the VW Bug not, because they did that last time. They didn't even have a backup generator in it. And it just, there's a lot of details and it's hard to bring it all together. But I think it's a good plan. It's just hard to wrap. I don't deal in millions. You maybe do with your job and some of you with your investments, but it is hard to wrap your head around this. And I just don't want to shortchange the public. We've gone this far. We had 30 some odd people on that charrette and kind of herding cats at times, but they all came to a consensus of what they wanted, a new vision for our park and keep as much green space as we could. Just, this is needed. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilor Wassinger?
Yes, sorry, there's a page in our packet, 290. Councilmember Munns, it kind of tripped my mind to this page. There's some things listed in some cost changes that are included in GMP 13. Now, these are all items that are still included that are part. That would include, of course, the splash park gates, Portland Loo, picnic tables and installation. I heard you say that maybe we were going to find a different source for those, but is that, it's listed on here, wood and metal picnic tables and installation. Is that something that?
So to clarify what this is,
Yes.
is anytime we have negotiated work that hasn't been bid, we work with a third party, which is KBA, to validate the
Okay.
costs. And
Okay.
so this was done in lead up to coming in here tonight. So
So
we're just
KBA
validating that the costs were accurate and
the
and
costs were
reasonable.
accurate based on the bids, or just based on overall, this is what we think a cost should be for?
That's self-performed work for
Okay.
Hoffman. So these are items that were not bid. They were negotiated with Hoffman.
Okay.
And before we award those, we have somebody else take a look.
Okay, and included in here then is the basketball courts, thus, and the drinking fountain, which is important, I agree. I have a question specific about the drinking fountain. Our current drinking fountain down there doesn't seem to work many times throughout the year, and I know because I use the park, I run right by it, and sometimes I want to drink a water and I have to go to the restroom and get it out of the faucet. So would this water fountain maybe work better, and would it be able to work throughout the year?
Year-round, I can't guarantee because we usually frost-proof everything down there about November timeframe.
Okay.
So I'd have to look into that. I doubt that it will be.
Okay.
And as far as a water bottle fill, I can't remember which standard we went with. They'll have. Okay. You remember the one that we put out on Pioneer Way?
It's very nice. The nice one?
Very
Yeah, okay, good.
Similar to that.
And I haven't heard and I thought about too, excuse me, the irrigation for this new seeding and the pipes and getting the sprinkler system working. Is that all included in this bid
Yes.
package too, just to be clear? Okay, thank you.
Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. I don't want to talk a second time if Councilmember Heisen's trying to.
Yes.
Yeah, Councilor Heisen, would you?
Yeah, I would. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I was thinking it's a good thing I was on mute because when Joel was talking about the turnout to meetings and feedback regarding this, I was literally like pumping my fist in the air and saying yes. Because he absolutely has a point when we spent years literally begging for feedback in terms of something that is so important to the community and got, like 2 or 3 dozen responses. That's just, so hopefully we are ushering in a of community involvement. I think that's what the case is. On that note, to respond to something that Jim said about not communicating with the public in terms of the park being closed or being disappointed and getting the word out there. This is rhetorical, so you can get back to me later, but I'm wondering what specifically would you suggest that we do between our website and social media and sending out postcards and announcements at public meetings and I mean, short of physically going door to door, I'm not what else can be done. So if you have a specific suggestion, I would, in terms of how to reach the public, I would really be interested in hearing that and supporting that in any way that I can. And finally, I want to thank, I want to thank Erica for doing that research, for looking into the other municipalities that have done parks. That was above and beyond. It's always really good to have context in comparison. So thank you so much for that. And thank you to Joe for the amount of data and detail in this report. I think between 250 and 300 pages just on this one agenda item. And all of it was useful. So, you know me, I'd always rather have too much information than not enough. So thank you very much for that. And I think as a general note that terminology matters when we're having discussions like these. The word bid and estimate and cost, those don't all mean the same thing. The terminology matters, so I think that we should be mindful of that when having these conversations. And I'm going down my list of notes, and I think I hit everything, so I'll stop now.
Thank you. Councilor Heisen? Yes, Councilor Servadius?
Thank you. Just to follow up something that Councilmember Wassinger made me think of, and I'm the Portland Loo. I'm a fan. I think I was one that brought that up originally. Mm-hmm. We asked in a workshop, and it may have been one of the clean water facility workshop meetings the smaller group meetings we have, we talked about, do we bid that or do we go out and get it? And I don't remember if Sandra Place was in that meeting. Did we get an estimate if we just ordered 4 as a city?
We didn't get them independent, but Hoffman did solicit bids from them, and we were looking at another vendor as well. Portland Loo ended up being the
right, but we
best
talked
value for
about
the
in that
city.
meeting, nothing against, I appreciate what you guys do, but if we called them up, what was our price? No one,
Yeah, Brett is
do we have that in
right.
writing?
There was actually higher when we called them initially.
Right, but did we ever send them anything in writing? Please give us an estimate for 4 Portland Loos delivered to Oak Harbor.
I remember.
We talked about it in the meeting,
Yeah,
specifically doing that.
And I'm trying to remember, I thought we did, and it's been such a long time, I'd have to go back and check my emails, and I think it was more informal.
Okay.
We actually got a quote from, we actually got $135,000
Why don't you hop up, Brett, and share your recollection there?
Yes, about a year and a half ago, Hank Neidham had actually.
Can I stop you?
Yes, please.
Within the last 6 weeks, we sat in a meeting, we talked about 4, possibly 6 with Island Transit, and we said, what would those cost? Can we get, maybe it's in the last 2 months, not a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
We didn't follow up on that?
We did not contact him as a city. We did contact him through Hoffman, and we got a formal quote from them. Hoffman's quote is based on quotes supplied by them.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilor Wiesner.
One final follow-up, and I don't mean to keep harping on this 850,000. I just want to make sure I have my head totally wrapped around this. Trevor, you had mentioned something about the initial $375,000 bid or estimate or allowance. Thanks, Tara, for making sure I'm correct on this. The $375,000 allowance was originally established by 2 contractors. You mentioned something along that line that was based upon some bids or some estimates from 2 contractors, or did I misunderstand something?
Yeah, come on. Come on up, or come on down.
Let me clarify what we did there. We did this kind of in the same manner that WashDOT would do. We put together a schedule of items, okay? Import of capillary brake, crew time for, basically crew rate for moving material and placing from stockpile, for doing structural excavation, a crew rate for doing structural demolition, as we had to do for the old RBC plant. So we gave them a plug number for quantities against which they put a unit price that they said they would provide that level of effort for, and we extended that and then analyzed to find out who the best value contractor was. But they didn't establish the allowance. We had some quantities that we could nail down, and the allowance was sound against those kinds of quantities, and we had other quantities we really had no idea on what the final site profiles were to be able to get the site fills established and establish excuse me, an allowance at the correct amount. Does that make sense?
Yes, and ultimately, who did do the work?
Interwest was the best value approach. When we analyzed the unit cost of work and then what we thought we were going to have for demobilization, remobilization equipment, or equipment standby, Interwest was the low price provider.
So they're the ones who ended up doing the almost $1.2 million worth of.
Correct. Under the unit prices that they bid competitively with Pelco. I think.
And it's not, we obviously didn't miss the unit price. What we missed was the amount of time it was going to take, because we weren't clearly defined in the scope of work that was going to need to be done when we established.
Yes, we didn't have an estimate to go against. For instance, in capillary brake, I think the quantity of capillary brake in tons was something like 10x what we had put in as a plug number to establish unit price. We put in an estimated number to knock down 30-year-old concrete in the RBC plant. I think we exceeded that by 4x in the number of days, crew days, to demolish that plant. Not that they were dogging it, it was just hard concrete, and we had some archaeological issues in that demolition. That was the kind of thing that we were dealing with.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Almberg.
I'd like to make a motion. Make the motion to authorize the mayor to sign AIA document A133-2009 Exhibit A, GMP 13, in the amount of $16,063,538 plus sales tax in the amount of $1,397,527 with Hoffman Construction for site improvements for the new wastewater plant and construction of Windjammer Park improvements, with the elective provisions for WJP 4, that's bid alternate number 4, and alternate number 1, West Kitchen, number 4, Phase 2, and Phase 2 planting, as presented in our recommended action of this agenda bill.
Second.
So we have a motion that reads exactly like the recommended action presented in our packet, which I think you all have. Motion by Councilor Almberg, second by Mayor Pro Tem Munns. Any other input or discussion? I would like to say that, as you know, that when I first saw these numbers, I stopped the project for a very short time. I communicated as I thought I needed to, and I worried about lots of things, especially the price. I have received, I think, enough information, and I am convinced that that the pricing was the engineer's estimate was far from an engineer's estimate, unfortunately. But that's my words. That's my take on it. And I've also learned that you can't put a lot of stock in those in certain cases. In any event, did a lot of soul searching, got a lot of input from a lot of citizens, as you might imagine. Considered stopping the project, only building, as Councilor Wiesner asked, only building what we need to build to finish that plant so that we've got that part taken care of. That I guess the side of that, of doing that bothered me the most is that beautiful park that we have down there. I think that our citizens expect more. I think they expect a better park, and I couldn't see closing that park any longer than what we have to. I had people tell me that Hoffman, as good as they are, and they are a good construction company, maybe shouldn't be building our park. Maybe it should be somebody else. And, you know, I get that question, but I am convinced after looking at the Brightwater plant that they built in King County, or that huge plant, that they can probably build or figure out how to build just about anything. So, in my estimation, we have to finish that park. We have to control these costs, and Mr. Stoll has had me ask him on many occasions, do we have our arms around these costs now? Is this the final? Now, tonight I heard a little hesitation about a couple of other concerns. I will track that as close as I can, believe me, to keep this project cost where it is today, where it's expected to be for our citizens. And should this pass, I will do everything in my power to make sure that we do everything we can to rebuild that Windjammer Park to make it the gem that it needs to be. I can't tell you that I've got that formula figured out yet. I do have some plans to get this project done, though. And I think it's important that we move ahead and do it. So, having said that, anybody else got any other final questions or concerns? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 ayes and 2 nays. I thought I might have to split a tie vote. I guess I don't have to do that. Okay, thank you, Mr. Stoll. We are now going to discuss resolution number 1813, which was originally 7C and has now been moved to 8D. Resolution 1813 is a discussion about general fund revenue stabilization fund use authorization. Oh, I've been asked about a 5-minute break. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break at this point. Okay, I think we'll reconvene now.
I'll tell you later.
8:28 here in the evening, and we are going to discuss Resolution Number 18-13, General Fund Revenue Stabilization Fund Use Authorization. Our city attorney, Nikki Esparza, is with us.
Thank you, Mayor. I am here this evening impersonating Ms. Soul. Do not assume I know what Ms. Soul knows, because I do not. I'm here to present Resolution 1813, which authorizes the city to utilize $711,076 from the General Fund Revenue Stabilization Fund to cover the deficit not the deficit, it's not the way to put it, is it now? When you authorized GMP 13, there was a deficit of $711,000 in the general fund portion of that authorization. The city can utilize the funds in the stabilization fund with a written finding by the city council that there are exigent circumstances that exist that would warrant that use. In this case, Ms. Soul talked to you at the workshop about the need to authorize GMP 13 and get that work done, and that would constitute exigent circumstances that would allow for the use of the stabilization fund. So this resolution both puts in writing the findings that there are exigent circumstances and authorizes the finance director to transfer that $711,000 from the stabilization fund to cover the cost that were not accounted for in GMP 13. So Tally is here if you have any technical financial questions that I absolutely cannot answer for you. Otherwise, the staff's recommendation is to approve Resolution 1813, which finds that there are exigent circumstances that would allow for the use of the stabilization fund.
Okay, see if the public has any questions or input. Okay, seeing none, yes, Councilor Almberg.
I have a whole list of questions for Tally. No, I don't. I'm just kidding. Actually, Patricia presented this very well, at our workshop and in this agenda bill. There's no questions from me, and I will support this. Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Servadius.
Ms. Boyer, have you had the pleasure of the podium? I'm not going to grill you. I was kidding.
Good
evening.
I know you could handle it, though. I'd like to thank staff or whoever recommended moving this behind the GMP 13 discussion. I was once again perplexed because if it had come before, I probably would have voted against it. We work at the break. Mr. Almberg said that's one of the things that's great about this job, if you will, that you can critically think of something, agree to disagree, and yet we still go out on the street and we're peers. So I'm not going to work against my peers. Like I said, I did not vote for GMP 13. I wasn't going to vote for this. At this point, that's kind of a moot point, so I will vote for it. One of the questions I think we've talked about, and I don't know, it's not really for you, but Mrs. Sparza, we've talked about the greater of 25% or $3 million. We bring in X amount into the general fund right off the top, or I guess this is a tally question. Yes. Right off the top, we're scraping 25%, correct?
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
If we bring in X dollars,
Yes.
we take 25% right off the top to satisfy this requirement, correct?
Yes.
For the stabilization fund.
Mm-hmm.
So do we have in the near future, are we going to revisit that, or how do we replenish what we're about to take out? Are we going to I think we're all probably open to revisiting that 25%.
I believe Ms. Soul was planning to bring that forward to revisit whether that would be the continued way to fund it.
Okay.
Because if you don't, you will be transferring a lot of money at the
We'll
end
be
of the year.
strapped trying to replenish this in a hurry. So I will support that. I would just like to see us revisit that in the near future, that it's probably time to take a look at that. Thank you.
Great idea.
Thank you.
Okay. Other council questions? Councilor Wiesner?
Yeah, I just have a comment, no questions, so you're safe. Like Councilmember Servadius, I think it's important to understand that we don't always have to agree, but I do think we all agree that the park portion of this project, what was promised years ago when this project started, that we were going to return a park that was as good or better than what we started with, is an important commitment. And obviously this is now needed to move those items forward. So I will be supporting this. I am concerned that, we're having to do a little bit of robbing Peter to pay Paul, but, and I certainly do wish that we would have been a little maybe ahead of the game on some of these grants. I understand the timing issue, but I still have a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that over the last year and a half that timing is not aligned. But I think this is a very important thing for the people. I think it's important to do this park project. Obviously, if we're gonna proceed with it, which obviously we are now, to do it as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And I'm going to hold Joe to his comments involving getting those fences moved back as soon as possible. I'm going to be down there checking on that, and I will be supporting this in order to fulfill that commitment that was made by previous council in getting this park put back in order.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Mayor Pro Tem?
If we're ready for a motion?
Councilor Heisen, are you with us?
I'm here.
Okay, ready for a motion?
I move we adopt Resolution 1813, approving the use of General Fund Revenues Stabilization Fund for completion of hardscape, landscape, electrical, and the splash park in the amount of $711,076.
Second.
So we've got a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Munns and a second by Councilor Almberg to adopt Resolution 1813, approving use of the General Fund Revenue Stabilization Fund for completion of hardscape, landscape, electrical, and the splash park in the amount of $711,076. Any other input or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I think that passes unanimously. So we will now move on to item number 8D, last item for the evening. Professional Services Agreement to BHC Consultants for the Pasek Sewer Overflow Structure, Amendment number 4. And we have our city engineer still with us.
Yeah, thank you,
Mr.
Mayor.
Stoll.
Council members. So a little background on the project. Location, I have some graphics later, but it's right there at the intersection of Pasek and Pioneer. It's that little knockout where you can overlook the water. So the initial purpose of engineering getting involved is there was the Prowler Memorial that's been dedicated, and that's the location that had been chosen for it. And as engineering is done with other art projects in town or dedications of this nature, we want to make sure they don't fall over. So we worked with a structural engineer to come out and take a look at the site, and come to find out it's relatively thin, and I'll show you some pictures of that in a minute. The concrete is. And so what this has evolved into is a retrofit of the lids to what are actually overflow structures from the original sewer system in the city. So that's our as-built drawing that we have for the, I'm totally serious, this is how we started. When this was built, we didn't have as-built, so these are sketches that our sewer crew put together on what is out there right now. This is an aerial view looking up Pasek, looking northward. You can see that to the west, just to the left of the crosswalk there's an existing lift station. That was installed when the structures, let me take a step back. Originally the sewer all went to here, it settled in these tanks and then went out into Oak Harbor. When we built the treatment plant down at Windjammer Park, the very original one, we had to put a lift station in here to take the sewage from here up to a high point so that it could make it to that new treatment plant, the new treatment plant at the time. So currently, we use it to collect that same sewage that was originally going to that location, and we use a combination of the west tank and the lift station to send that sewage over to the treatment plant. The east tank, I think it was constructed with the intent of being an additional overflow, or maybe it was part of the original combined sewer, but it largely goes unused right now. There's actually, while I got the picture up, there's some really interesting things going on with these two. It's really two separate tanks that are tied together. The west tank started out, it was pretty below sidewalk level some distance. When I don't know if it's when they built the east tank or what happened, but they put soil on top of that tank to bring it up to grade with the sidewalk, and then put another layer of concrete over the top of it. So there's, on that west tank, there's concrete slab, soil, which is now condensed, and there's a gap. There's another lid to the actual tank that's used. And then the east tank is full height. So just kind of some other photos to kind of give you a general feel of where things are. I had the one in the upper left is the fun one, built by Works Progress Administration, 1939, 1940. I have no idea what the Works Progress Administration is. Brett's telling him. Brett knows. So it's, in other words, it's been there a little while. When we initially went out with the structural engineer as part of their first contract, this is just an example. That's where the slab sits on top of the wall. It's 3.5 inches. And then over the other hole that's cored through there is over the west tank to see how big that annular space is underneath the slab, to see if it was actually soil underneath there or how thick the concrete was. We had no real good idea. And it's not quite 4 inches. If you're familiar with concrete work, usually you have to have, the standard is you have 2 inches of cover on rebar. So if you had rebar in the middle of that, even if it was one stick, and you've only got 3.5 inches of concrete, you probably don't got rebar in there. That's at least that's my guesstimate. I think in the calculations, the engineer assumed some basic amount, but it's not what we would do today. So kind of following the storyline along, so we hired BHC to come out. They looked at the site. They found that the concrete slabs were too thin to hold the monument. We ended up putting a sign out there saying there was a maximum load capacity of 20 people. Whoever happens to have that sign, if they give it back, we'd like to put that back out there. It's a recommendation of our engineer, and it is a risk to the city. So during the design, there's a desire to improve the overall appearance of the overlook. So that kind of changed the scope that wasn't originally planned for with BHC. And that's like scoring the concrete, some different handrails, things like that. So while research, that the gift that keeps on giving, when we started looking into the building permit, we realized that the structure appeared to be, and it doesn't show as well as it could on here, but it stretched, at least on Island County Assessor's maps, online maps, it appears to span 3 properties. One of which is city-owned, one of which is city right-of-way, and one of which is private. So that led us to bring on a surveyor to determine exactly where the property lines were and to help us develop an easement. This in turn was given back to the BHC. This updated information has required them to update their design because some of the initial measurements weren't as accurate as they could have been. Now that we have survey, it's in one spot I believe it's as much as 2 feet off, so they felt the need to update their design to compensate for that. And that's a large part of what we're asking for the scope to do tonight, and include those aesthetic requests that we had. So just a cost summary for you. This started back in 2016 with the initial contract. It was signed by the mayor to go out and take a look. We came in with a time extension in December of 16. Came back again in March of 2017 with the design contract. And December of 2017, we did another time extension to allow us to work through the property issues. And then we're here today with amendment number 4. I'd like to mention that on the original initial contact, there was a contingency of 10% allowed in that approval that did not get used. So it's not included in total, and we won't be taking advantage of that at all. So the total contract amount, if you want to include the initial investigation plus the design phases, a total of $78,000 and some change. So I didn't put a slide in here because I didn't get to it in time, but I did talk to Alex, our project manager on this, and he talked to BHC about some alternatives to replacing the lids. We looked at all kinds of creative options, from filling them with sand to filling them with CDF, which is real fluid concrete. And the cost estimates actually came back. Well, one, the sand, the engineer didn't believe that it would provide the structural strength needed. The CDF would have cost more than replacing the lids. So the options we're really left with in order to maintain minimal risk for the city is to either fence it off and not use it, or replace the lids. And then when we replace the lids, we have the option of considering whether or not we do the aesthetic improvements that have been proposed. And those, so the cost difference is $100,000 to $105,000 versus $130,000 if you include the aesthetic improvements. Once again, it's an engineer's estimate, so I'll leave you with that. But that's at least the order of magnitude that we're dealing with for the construction improvements. With that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Okay, before we do that, we'll see if the public has any questions or... Okay, seeing none, bring it back to the council. Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Stowell, why did we proceed with the bid or the design on this project and then find out after the design was complete of the encroachment issues? It seems kind of backwards that we were designing something we didn't have all the information on, or?
It was kind of one of those deals where we were working on another project named, I believe it in fact was the treatment plant, where you can't have a building permit over a property line. There was another one with the school district where they wanted a building permit over a property line. And then all of a sudden our hackles went up and we go, oh my goodness, this one it's over property line too. We didn't expect it being on the water side. And when it came to fruition, we had to chase it down.
Well, wouldn't it make more sense to work out something with the property? I mean, this thing's been here for 78 years. Rather than redesign it and start from scratch? I mean, isn't there another alternative than spending another $21,000 on a design?
You know, I do understand your perspective on that. We do have an easement, and we are working with the property owner to get that signed. There's some family issues there that we're working through, and I don't think that that'll be anything to worry about. As far as going back and doing the redesign, we were trying to do the design inexpensively, and did it basically with hand measurements and the as-built that you saw. Once we realized there was a property issue, we hired a surveyor to come out, and while he was doing that and locating the exact location of it so we could situate it and write the easement properly, discovered that the dimensions that we started with were not correct.
Wow. So we spent $39,000 with misinformation all the way around, size, location. everything, and so now that's gonna cost us $21,000 to correct that error?
Yeah.
I appreciate the honesty there and your straightforwardness. So I guess I'm gonna be this guy again. What if we did nothing? I mean, what if we put up a fence, didn't allow people on it? It just, I mean, we're talking $200,000, it sounds like, between the $78,000 we're gonna have into design and bidding paperwork. Then we've got a $105,000 engineer's estimate, which could be on or could be off, because you know how those engineers are.
Right.
And so it sounds like we're approaching $200,000 to make a place to place a statue.
It is more than that. The statue was a catalyst to finding that there was an issue with the integrity of the lids on those tanks. And now we're left in a situation where we either correct it or fence it off. And either way, whichever direction you want to give me, I'm fine with.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. Mr. Stoll, would you please give a little background story, maybe for the public? And it's obviously more than a statue. We're honoring lost aviators. And do you want to give the backstory on that? I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with what we're trying to do here.
I'm not sure I know the full backstory, other than there were 3 jets that went down, and this is to memorialize that.
Right, so sitting on the Parks Board, the family members, they raised the money. We've had this now for how long?
It's been sitting out behind Public Works for quite some time.
So they approached the Parks Board in the city. We'd like to honor these fallen aviators. This is the drawings. This is what we'd like to do. The Parks Board said, this makes sense. I think the family suggested the location. I don't remember how we picked that location. But as we worked through that and they determined, hey, this would be a good location, the way it's oriented overlooking the harbor there, that's when the discovery was made that structurally this isn't sound to support that. So I don't know when we communicated to the family. I think that was through the process. They marched full steam ahead. We've had this now. It's sort of a obelisk-looking monument. This is one of those scenarios that at some point we need to kind of do the right thing, and whether it's relocate that or just get it done, I'm not a fan of spending anything more, but it's got to be safe. And if we put it there, we need to deal with this. We can't have a large granite obelisk and people gathering there. Or we contact that family and say, but they've been waiting now, it's over a year and a half, so that's kind of the backstory on that, but it was the folks that passed from VAQ 129.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Mr. Stowell, are we going to be using this lift station and those tanks once we get the new sewer treatment plant going?
Yes,
Or are we just going to ignore it and cut it off?
the west tank we'd like to maintain, and the lift station will need to be maintained. The east tank does not need to remain. Does that make sense? Let me show you.
Okay.
So I'm going to use the magic pointer here if I can avoid hitting Nikki in the eye. This is the lift station, and it does have some storage in it for sewage, but not much. The west tank is used as equalization for that lift station. And matter of fact, when we went to do an inspection of that tank, they couldn't go inside because there was still a couple feet of sewage in the bottom. The east tank, however, we pumped that nearly dry and were able to move around freely in it, and it's large void inside, really. Does that help?
Okay. Just wanted to know if they still have a purpose.
Yes.
That's what I wanted
At least
to
the
know.
one
Thank you.
does.
All right. Thank you.
Councilor Ellenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, Mr. Stowell, we've spent a lot of time on this topic privately, and we go around and around on it. Tell me your logic for maintaining that pump and that equalization tank relative to potential Navy use if they come to adjoin the wastewater treatment plant. What is that relationship?
Well, we were brainstorming about this earlier on the phone, and I was just trying to think of potential uses for it in the future if we were to maintain it. I have no idea if that would be the case or not. It was just I was trying to look for pros for why we would need to keep those intact.
Okay, so we'll scratch the Navy off the list on the reason for keeping that. And if for some reason they come down that street to connect in with our plant, that's going to be on their ticket, I would imagine. Would you agree with that?
That'll be decided at a later time.
At a later time, okay. And so then the equalization for our use, we have a use with the new wastewater treatment plant. There will be a purpose for equalization storage.
For that lift station that's immediately adjacent to the tank.
And that's a separate cell from the larger eastern section, correct?
That's correct.
And we could fill, won't get into what we're filling with, but technically we could fill that east chamber. That's the bigger chamber of the two.
Correct.
Okay. And while we're on that topic, even though I don't have PE after my title, I have many, many years of construction experience and knowledge, and I disagree with the rationale that the engineer has, that he would not accept either air-and-train buckshot, which is coarse sand and pea gravel, or concrete sand, not CDF, which is lean concrete. That's more expensive. But to fill that with buckshot, it does flow. It flows and settles out at 100%. He's not willing to take that position. Obviously, he'd talk himself out of a fairly major contract if he took that position, and we could salvage that slab. So in a sense, this sounds a little sarcastic, and I apologize if it does sound that way. We have the fox watching the chicken coop, because he's probably protecting his future with this particular project. And the reason this project bothers me from an engineering standpoint is, using your numbers, we have $130,000 approximately for construction. That does not include the survey that you had Mr. Frazier do. That's the way you represented it. And it doesn't include staff time, right?
Correct.
But here's the part that really bothers me. This contract at $78,000 for engineering is 60% of construction cost. 60% of construction cost. That's totally out of scale for me. I can't get on board with this when we are looking for funds in other areas. We just don't have money to throw away. And I kind of think that we're throwing it away. And we may have been throwing it away earlier, not knowing it. So I'm not going to support this. I'm going to vote no. Thank you, Mr. Stowell.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. I did just want to follow up on Councilman Servadius's comments about the statue. And I do appreciate the background on that, obviously, being new to the council. And I try to read up on things that have happened in the past. And I'm obviously all for the placement of this statue. I was, here when those folks in VAQ 129 were lost. It just, if this isn't the right spot, it's not the right spot. I would equate this to, let's pick a spot where we got to move a building to put something. Well, we're not going to do that. So I think we have other areas in the town that can be a very prominent place for this monument. I realize this is our Walk of Honor area, and that's one of the reasons they selected this area. We've got areas, down by the corner. I think there's other sufficient areas that could do this. We're talking some serious money to basically take a small section in town, right next to a stairwell where you can walk down to the beach. So if you want to go to the beach, you can get down that stairwell, but if you want to stand up above the beach, we're going to spend a couple of $100,000 to do so. I'm a kind of a common sense guy, and I have to agree with Mr. Almberg for one of the first times tonight, by the way, Rick. You see, it is going to happen. That the common sense says that if we bring in an engineer to look at something that's 78 years old, that an engineer looking at it today, by today's standards, it's not going to pass muster. And I think we could equate that to any structure anywhere. So I realize the guys with the PE behind their names probably have a lot more knowledge on this, but common sense says to me that it's been there for 78 years. Obviously, we know now that there's some risk involved with overloading the structure, and I think that can be addressed through fencing or signage or other combinations of means. I certainly do not want to put the public at risk in any way, shape, or form. But I agree with Councilman Almberg that it just doesn't sound right. Doesn't sound like we're getting that value engineering, that we're getting that solution that is going to result in the least expensive cost. Sounds like we've got a set of engineers that have a preconceived notion in their mind of what needs to happen. And I just think $78,000 for design work for a 15-foot by 80-foot section of sidewalk is just too much, and I don't think I can support this moving forward. I will certainly support the placement of that statue as soon as practical and as soon as we can find an appropriate location to recognize those family members. 100% support behind that. I just can't support this continued expense on this particular project.
Councilor Wassinger.
Yes, I have some practical type questions too, just on the safety and of it. So how?
Sorry, point of order,
Oh,
Mayor.
yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, yep, yes, or,
Move to extend the meeting time to 9:30.
okay, motion to extend our time to 9:30 tonight. We have a motion by Servadia, second by Almberg. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, okay.
Thank you. I
sorry
did. I
about
wasn't
that.
watching the clock. Thank you for doing that. No, that's fine. How much does the statue weigh? I mean, what was the tipping point? Was it more than the 20 people?
I think it's close to 2,000 pounds.
Okay.
It's about 14 feet, 12 to 14
Yeah,
feet
I mean,
tall.
I remember my time on the park board before I was appointed to council. I think that we were sort of in pre-talks about this monument, and I remember it being beautiful. I've seen pictures, and it is a very nice structure and monument. So taking out the discussion of the statue, because I agree that I think is something that we could find a good spot for, even if it's not this spot. I mean, we're doing a park that we just approved, and there may be some good little nooks and crannies or locations that we can adjust for that. We live in a beautiful town. There's beautiful spots all along. Now, where is the section on Pioneer that we're doing the major, that we got the grant for, with the sidewalks and the benches and
Veterans Park further
Veterans Park?
Oh, that's
I'm
further to
in
the
relation
east.
to this. So it's further,
Yeah,
like
it's
one
a-
block, is it one block? Is it the next cross down?
Yes.
I can't remember the
It's
street
the
name,
next
I'm sorry.
crosswalk down. It's right across from the university.
Okay,
the college.
okay. So I know there are some good things going on that street. So taking out the consideration of the statue, what is standard for safety for using a sidewalk? Is 20 people? Would we have to fence it off? Would we have to completely close it down for public being able to walk on it? And how could we redirect the public walking on it? I'm just not real familiar with how far out those tanks go, where that safety issue is. Can you sort of explain what the risk is?
The lids go right up to the edge of sidewalk, and
Okay.
actually the sidewalk's narrow there where the crosswalk is because of the tanks. Since I don't believe it's in human nature to obey a sign that says only 20 people on a lid like that, I think some sort of railing to keep people from walking on it would be appropriate.
So they would still have a sidewalk to walk on, even if we
Yes.
put a railing up and left it. Again, taking out the statue and just getting it to a standard point that you would feel comfortable that people could walk on it. And I guess maybe what I'm trying to wrap my brain around is what is a normal people number that you would find acceptable or the industry would to be walking on?
What's the number per square foot? It's 90 pounds per square foot. I think in that area, if you were to design it, and I'm just doing this off the cuff, it'd be upwards of 300. Because that's actually people are the worst loading for anything. So you'd have to assign the worst for it.
So this, my thinking is just in a very practical sense. I would like for it to be at a point where we could safely have people walking on it to a safe standard, obviously for our public. The monument can be moved to other locations. We can't move people. I want to have it accessible to people being able to use a bigger space than a narrow sidewalk. But would there be alternatives just to get it up to that 90 pounds per square foot, a safe standard for people to use that aren't as extensive as what you're proposing?
I understand where you're going. Is there, if we don't place the monument there, would the design be different?
Yeah.
Or could we come up with a different answer? It's going to be the same answer. Whether or not the monument's there, it's going to be the same design. At least if for the structural part, if we had void underneath it, it's going to be the same.
So if we don't approve this, your recommendation would be to just put a railing up, to keep people off of it for safety.
That would be if I thought people would actually obey the sign that we put out there that's no longer there, then I would say leave it be. But knowing that that's not the case, I would fence it off.
I mean, I agree with your thinking on that one. I really do. We know that signs don't really deter much sometimes.
And I just want to add, at the end of the day, I need to feel comfortable that if something should happen, that I did something about it to prevent it from happening.
Thank you.
Councilor Servadius.
Just making sure, I don't want to jump over Councilmember
No, you're fine.
Heisen or Wassinger. Councilmember Heisen, you're okay?
I am. I do have a question when you guys are done.
Why don't you go ahead and ask it now?
Okay, I'm wondering if we forego the design for now and just limit access to the part that we're concerned about, in looking long-term into the future, what would that look like? I mean, would we eventually want to get something designed and remodel that? Like, how temporary would this be? Because I wouldn't want just fenced-off area indefinitely, if that makes sense.
Okay, let me run through a scenario. If I were to fence it off, what I might do is take the fence that's up further, because there is no fall hazard if you move the fence up close to the sidewalk. I'd take that, the railing the railing that's there now, and move it back and weld it back on. Remove the benches and the planters from the top of the tank. Don't make it inviting for people to go out there.
You said, I thought you had more than one. That's the only one?
The others, like we did up at Veterans Park, put some wood railing up. I mean, there's no real good way. I mean, if we were intending on leaving it and not pursuing replacing the lids and not allowing people to walk on there in the future, I would suggest moving the railing that we have out there, see if there's a way to move that up to the sidewalk and remove the features that are on top of the tank now. That would be if we were looking at not doing anything in the future. We're leaving it like it is. We're not going to touch it again. it's kind of up to you which way you'd like to go.
Thank you.
Councilor Servadius.
Do you know, and I should know this, being the liaison of the park board, have there been any communications expressed or implied to the family that this is where it's going?
I don't know how definitive it's been, but they have offered to contribute additional funds through Hank. I've heard that they've been interested in contributing additional funds in addition to the monument, to as much as 10,000, I believe, is what the email said.
Okay. The reason I bring that up, I wasn't at the last council meeting, but I watched and listened to a fairly animated discussion on a consent agenda item where, if I'm not mistaken, everyone that weighed in on that item talked about how they didn't necessarily agree with the process and how it had went down with regards to the hours of leave that were being accrued. But it was important to fulfill a promise that was made and then change that process and make sure there was consistency going forward. So I don't know if we need to decide this tonight. I don't know what communications have been sent to the family. If it's something we think we're going to address in the future, I don't know if it's 2 years from now or 5 years from now, or do we knuckle down and maybe not decide tonight? But I would just be curious what we've communicated to that family. It's obviously an emotional topic, and I don't want emotion to win the day. That's normally not how I work. But I would just be curious how we've communicated with them and make sure we're negotiating in good faith. It's not necessarily, the public process isn't always the most efficient economic process. I realize that. I just want to make sure we're doing what we've said or implied possibly that we're going to do. That's all.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Mr. Stowell, so for Holland Happening Parade, then you're going to have to do some type of temporary barricade so people can't stand on that, because that's how fragile it is? If you only want 20 people there, and you know how they can stack in there. I mean, Holland Happening is a huge parade, and they line up back there because they want more candy, at least their kids do. So I'm just thinking of events. What do we need to do to keep it safe? Because this isn't going to get done before then. So if it really is that fragile, then Public Works would have to think of something for that, and 4th of July and Music Festival. I don't think they congregate that large, but the hydros. I mean, I'm just trying to think out.
If the direction is to not move forward with replacing the lids, and it is to restrict access, I'm sure we can work with Public Works to come up with a way of preventing people, an obvious way of preventing people from going out there. If somebody chooses to climb over a fence to go out there, I think that becomes something that's on them.
Okay, all right, just wondering. Thank you.
Councilor Wassinger.
I kind of agree with Councilmember Servades that what would happen if we just decided to table this and not make a decision right now? Are we under a time stamp?
No. Well, if you decided to table it, I guess I would need some direction on what information would help.
Go ahead, Councilor Omberg, or Councilor Servadius, go ahead.
Thank you. I was just looking to make sure, I believe I would, for me, the only information I would still probably support it. Once again, I realize this is one of those, after my last lengthy discussion on efficiencies, this is one of those that I probably will support. The only information I would want to be certain on is how we've communicated with the family or families that have been involved with this. So with that, and I think we could get that answer very quickly, I would move to postpone this agenda item to our next meeting.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to postpone this agenda item until the next meeting. Motion by Councilor Servadius, second by Councilor Wassinger. So other input, other questions? Yes.
If we're going to postpone it and then come back to this, I would like to see the staff consider new locations, these are options, new location, or a fence some distance from the shoreline edge, at a railing, some distance from the shoreline, because that actually reduces the load on that slab span. And there's a concrete beam and a column about 6 feet back from the street edge of that tank. So there's a real narrow span, and you may want to consider having your planters and the fence and that stuff pulled back to that distance. That's one thing to consider. Get a different structural opinion about the buckshot, because it really surprises me that we're getting pushback on that. That is a very, very common subgrade fill for a slab. And you have to have 100% density for a slab, especially with heavy traffic. And the other alternative on the railing is, instead of involving the engineer in that, I think potentially under the mayor's authority, we could go to a small works roster to someone like Washington Iron for a bid design on that handrail. I know it has to meet certain code for, your 4 inches clear, 4.5 inch clear, etc. But that doesn't need to necessarily be engineered by a structural engineer.
No, and I agree with you, because I'd have to talk with the building department, but since there's not a fall hazard, once you have that fence, that railing pulled back,
Yeah.
I don't know that you'd have to have that 4-inch opening
And
requirement or not.
that
I'd
is
have to check.
correct. Yeah, because there's more than, I think, 4 feet or 5 feet from the drop-off right there, setback. But any event, I would like to see the staff come back with some prepared options, because I still won't support a engineering contract that costs 60% of the anticipated construction costs. It just doesn't make sense.
So we do have a motion? Any other input? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
We adjourn.
Oh.
Motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
2 seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah, this is a long one.
Yeah. No kidding. No kidding.